You wake before the village does, in that delicate moment when night hasn't fully surrendered to dawn. The wooden floorboards beneath your feet hold their memory of summer warmth, though autumn has begun its gentle descent. Your small room, with its collection of dried herbs hanging from rough-hewn rafters, fills with the first hesitant light of day, not gold yet, but a patient blue that turns familiar objects into silhouettes waiting to be remembered. The woolen blanket slides from your shoulders as you rise its texture against your skin, a reminder of the sheep that graze on hillsides just beyond the village walls. You've known their wool since childhood, have watched it transform from raw fleece to woven comfort through hands that understood the value of patience. This morning ritual, this rising before necessity demands it, has become your private sanctuary, a moment when the world hasn't yet asked anything of you. You move toward the small window, its glass uneven and bubbled, transforming the outside world into a wavering impression rather than a perfect image. Through this imperfect lens, you watch the village square, cobblestones still glistening with evening dew, wooden shutters still drawn against the night's whispers. The mountain beyond stands eternal, its peak touching clouds that carry morning's first blush. How many generations have awakened to this same view? How many healers before you have stood at similar windows, gathering resolve before stepping into their responsibilities? Your fingers trace the windowsill's edge, feeling the subtle irregularities where time has worn away the wood. These small imperfections have become as familiar to you as the lines on your palm, a geography of time passing, of life continuing despite uncertainty. The cool morning air slips through invisible cracks, carrying with it the distant sound of a stream that never ceases its journey, and the faint scent of pine that surrounds the village like a protective embrace. In the corner, your leather satchel waits, companion to countless journeys through the village and beyond. Its surface bears the patina of rain showers endured, of being set down on countless doorsteps, of brushing against stone walls as you've hurried to those in need. This morning, you'll fill it with fresh herbs from your garden, with tinctures carefully prepared by candlelight, with small jars of salve that required hours of slow stirring to reach the perfect consistency. You've learned that preparation is its own form of caring, that the quiet moments before others wake, when your hands work steadily by candlelight, are as much a part of healing as any remedy you provide. In these solitary hours, your thoughts settle like leaves, finding their place on a forest floor, and your breath aligns with the rhythm of a world still suspended between dreaming and waking. The floorboards creak beneath your careful steps as you move toward the small kitchen area. Your hands operating on memory alone find the rough pottery mug, the small pouch of dried mint and lemon balm. The ritual of morning tea requires no conscious thought, the measuring of leaves, the waiting for water to reach the perfect temperature, the patient moments of steeping. Steam rises in lazy curls, catching the strengthening light, and you cradle the warmth between your palms, feeling how the heat travels through skin, through tissue, into the very core of your being. Outside, the first bird calls pierce the morning stillness, not the full chorus that will come with true daylight, but solitary voices testing the air. You recognize each one: the thrush with its melodic warble, the blackbird's insistent declaration, the distant dove, whose gentle cooing seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. These sounds anchor you to the present moment, to this particular morning that has never existed before and will never come again. You sip your tea slowly, savoring the subtle interplay of flavors that change as the liquid cools. There's something in this simple pleasure that reminds you why you chose this path, why you continue to wake each day and carry your knowledge through the village streets. It's not merely about alleviating suffering, though that remains at the heart of your work. It's about these moments of awareness, of being fully present to the miracle of existence, even in its most ordinary manifestations. Soon, you will gather your supplies, don your leather mask and dark cloak, and step out into a world that needs your calm presence. But for now, in this suspended moment between night and day, between solitude and service, you allow yourself to simply be a person awakening to another day, grateful for the quiet breath that moves through you, for the steady heartbeat that has carried you this far, and for the knowledge that has become wisdom through years of attentive practice. The cup empties, the light strengthens, a new day begins its unfolding. You reach for your leather satchel with the familiarity of a gesture repeated thousands of times. Its weight changes with the seasons, lighter in summer when fresh herbs are abundant, heavier in winter when dried remedies and thicker blankets must be carried to those in need. Today, it feels perfectly balanced in your hand, like an extension of your arm rather than a separate object. Inside this weathered companion lie the tools of your quiet vocation, glass vials filled with tinctures that took weeks to mature, their contents catching the morning light in shades of amber emerald and deep burgundy. Small cloth pouches contain dried herbs, each tied with different colored threads. A personal system you developed years ago when you realized memory alone wasn't enough to distinguish between similar-looking leaves in moments of urgency. Your fingers know these colors by touch: red for fever, blue for sleep, green for digestion, yellow for pain. You add fresh sprigs of rosemary and thyme from the earthenware jar on your table. Their fragrance rises immediately, sharp, clean, reminiscent of hillsides warmed by summer sun. These particular plants grew in the small garden behind your cottage, tended by your hands through drought and rain, spoken to in early mornings when only the plants could hear your hopes for the day ahead. You believe, though, you've never shared this thought with anyone, that herbs grown with intention carry stronger healing properties than those gathered hastily or without care. Beneath the remedies lies a small leather-bound journal, its pages wavy from dampness and use. Inside, written in your careful script, are observations collected over years. Which combination of herbs helped old Willem's persistent cough? How many drops of valerian tincture finally allowed young Sarah to sleep through the night after her nightmares began? Which salve healed the baker's burned hands without leaving scars? This knowledge wasn't found in books, but earned through attention, through failure, and success through listening when others might have prescribed without hearing. You tuck a clean cloth into the side pocket, a simple square of linen washed so many times its original color has faded to the palest blue, nearly indistinguishable from white. How many tears has this cloth absorbed? How many foreheads has it cooled? These humble tools, a piece of cloth, a handful of plants, a jar of salve, have become instruments of connection, creating moments of trust between your hands and the suffering of others. At the bottom of your bag rests a small wooden box, polished smooth by years of handling. Inside lies your most precious possession, a collection of small stones gathered from significant moments in your life. The smooth gray pebble from the stream where you first decided to study healing, the piece of rose quartz given to you by your teacher when you completed your apprenticeship, the unusual striped stone found on the day you helped bring twins safely into the world after a difficult labor. These carry no medicinal properties, yet they ground you in your purpose. When doubt creeps in during difficult times, you add a small loaf of bread wrapped in cloth, not for any patient, but for yourself. Experience has taught you that hunger can compromise judgment, and your work requires clarity above all else. The bread came from your neighbor, the baker's wife, who insists on bringing you a fresh loaf each evening in ongoing gratitude for the sleeping draught you prepared for her husband when his night terrors returned last winter. You've told her payment isn't necessary, but she persists, and you've learned that allowing others to reciprocate care is its own form of medicine. The weight of the bag against your hip as you secure it across your body feels right, substantial, without being burdensome. What you carry has been carefully considered, refined over years of walking these village paths. Nothing unnecessary weighs you down. Nothing essential has been forgotten, but you carry more than physical objects. As you prepare to step outside, you carry knowledge passed down through generations, some of it written in fading ink on preserved parchment, but most transmitted through demonstration, through stories told while gathering plants or preparing remedies. You carry memories of those you couldn't save, whose final moments taught you about acceptance and the limits of human intervention. You carry the trust of people who invite you into their homes during their most vulnerable moments, who believe in your ability to ease suffering, even when you yourself harbor doubts. You carry questions that remain unanswered despite years of study. Why some recover against all expectations, while others slip away despite your best efforts. Why certain combinations of herbs work differently in different bodies. How much of healing comes from the remedies themselves, and how much from the belief that relief is possible. These questions have become familiar companions rather than frustrations, reminders that mystery remains at the heart of your practice, and perhaps most importantly, you carry an unwavering commitment to presence, to bringing your full attention to each person you attend, regardless of their status in the village hierarchy, regardless of whether their ailment is complex or simple, regardless of how many others await your visit. This quality of attention has become your most powerful medicine, though it appears on no list of remedies and can be measured in no conventional way. You check the contents of your bag one final time, adjusting the placement of a jar that has shifted, ensuring the stopper on a particular tincture is secure. Then you reach for your cloak, draping it around your shoulders with deliberate care. The mask, crafted from leather that has darkened with use, fits perfectly against your features. These aren't merely protection, they're symbols of your role, recognized throughout the village and beyond. What you carry would be a burden if you hadn't learned to transform obligation into purpose. Routine into ritual knowledge, into wisdom. But this transformation has happened so gradually, so naturally, that you barely noticed it occurring. Like a garden changing through seasons, like river stones smoothed by constant water, like grief slowly giving way to memory. You stand at your threshold, bag secured ready for what the day may bring. The weight against your side is reassuring, a tangible reminder of your preparation, your commitment, your place in this community. You carry these things not as a healer, separate from those you treat, but as a human being connected to other human beings through the universal experience of vulnerability and resilience. The door opens. The village awaits. You step onto the cobblestone street as the village begins to stir from its slumber. The stones beneath your feet tell their own stories, some worn smooth in the center from centuries of footsteps, others still maintaining their rough-hewn edges where fewer travelers pass. You've memorized their pattern without conscious effort, knowing instinctively where to place your feet when returning home in darkness, which sections become treacherously slick after rain, which areas collect the warmest sunlight on winter afternoons. The narrow street winds between buildings constructed by hands long since returned to earth. Some walls lean slightly inward as if whispering secrets to their neighbors across the way. Windows catch the strengthening morning light, transforming ordinary glass into momentary gold. You notice how the shadows retreat inch by inch as the sun climbs higher, revealing textures in the stone walls that remain hidden in harsher light, delicate swirls of fossilized creatures, thin veins of quartz that sparkle unexpectedly, patches of pale green lichen that persist despite all odds. The air changes as you walk, shifting from the herbal sanctuary of your home to the complex symphony of village life. Near the bakery, the warm, yeasty aroma of fresh bread dominates all other scents. You breathe deeply, allowing the fragrance to fill your lungs, a different kind of nourishment. The baker sees you through his open door and raises a flour-dusted hand in greeting. His forearms bear the faded scars of years spent reaching into hot ovens, some of those scars treated with your salves in years past. No words are exchanged, but the acknowledgement carries years of shared history, of mutual respect, built through small interactions. You continue past the blacksmith's forge, not yet lit, but waiting for the day's work to begin. The lingering metallic scent mingles with traces of yesterday's coal fire. Even silent, the space resonates with potential energy, the suspended moment before creation. How many times have you treated the blacksmith's burns and cuts? How many times has he repaired the metal clasps on your leather bag without accepting payment? These unspoken exchanges form the invisible threads that bind the village together, creating resilience where individual strength might fail. The street narrows as you approach the old well at the center of the square. Water drawn from its depths tastes faintly of minerals carried through underground passages, a flavor that visitors notice immediately, but that locals have long ceased to detect. 3 women gather there already, their voices kept low in morning's hush, but their gestures animated. They pause as you approach, offering respectful nods. You know what concerns each of them. Carries one with a mother whose memory fades like evening light, another with a child whose cough returned with autumn's first chill, the third with hands increasingly betrayed by pain when she tries to continue. her intricate embroidery work. "Will you come by today?" one asks, her question simple but heavy with underlying worry. Before midday, you promise your voice, calm despite the mental calculation of how many homes you must visit, how many hours of daylight you can claim before exhaustion dulls your effectiveness. They resume their conversation as you continue onward, but you feel their collective gaze following your progress, not with suspicion, but with the particular attention reserved for those whose skills might be needed at any moment, whose absence would leave a void no one else could adequately fill. The path inclines slightly as you head toward the eastern edge of the village, where the oldest homes stand, watched over by ancient oak trees. Their massive roots have gradually shifted stone foundations over generations, creating undulating floors that residents have simply adapted to rather than fought against. You marvel, not for the first time, at this quiet acceptance, this understanding that some forces cannot be resisted, only accommodated with grace. A child darts from a side alley, momentarily startled by your masked appearance before recognition dawns. She carries a small wooden bucket, her knuckles white with effort. Without breaking stride, you reach into your bag and offer a small bundle of dried lavender tied with twine. Not medicine for any particular ailment, but a small kindness that brings an immediate smile to her face. These moments of connection, seemingly inconsequential, form another type of healing, one not recorded in your journal, but perhaps more enduring than any herbal remedy. The weight of your bag shifts against your hip as you ascend the steepest part of the street. Years ago, this climb left you breathless. Now your body has adapted to its demands, finding a sustainable rhythm that can be maintained day after day, season after season. Your breathing deepens, but remains steady. Your pace slows, but never halts. This, too, has become metaphor, the understanding that difficult passages require adjustment rather than abandonment, that forward movement matters more than speed. Near the village boundary, the cobblestones give way to a dirt path, bordered by wild grasses bent with morning dew. Each step leaves a temporary impression that will vanish as the day warms. You pause here, as you often do, to look back at the collection of homes and workshops that form the village. Smoke rises from early morning fires, thin gray ribbons connecting earth to sky. The bell tower stands tallest among the buildings, its shadow stretching toward the western hills. From this distance, the village appears both vulnerable and enduring, a human endeavor sustained through countless seasons by nothing more substantial than shared necessity and accumulated care. You turn toward your first destination of the day, a small cottage, partially obscured by an ancient willow tree. Inside, an elderly woman waits with patience, born from a lifetime of understanding that all things, pain included, eventually transform into something else. You adjust your mask, ensuring it sits properly against your face, and mentally prepare for the specific quality of attention her condition requires. The path you walk is never truly the same twice. Light changes, seasons shift, urgent needs arise unexpectedly, but there's comfort in the familiarity of your route, in knowing that your footsteps align with those who carried similar knowledge before you, and that others will follow when you no longer make this journey. The work continues through different hands, different voices, different approaches, but always with the same fundamental recognition that walking alongside others during difficult passages is perhaps the most profound medicine of all. You approach the cottage door and knock gently. 3 soft taps that announce your presence without demanding immediate response. The path has brought you here, to this specific threshold, to this particular moment of connection. Whatever waits, inside, you arrive fully present, carrying not just remedies, but the accumulated wisdom of countless such mornings, countless such encounters, countless moments of bearing witness to both suffering and recovery. The door opens. Another kind of journey begins. Your hands have developed their own intelligence over the years, a knowledge separate from what your mind has studied in ancient texts or learned from village elders. They recognize textures without the aid of sight sense temperature changes, too subtle for conscious awareness. Feel the subtle resistance in a swollen joint before the patient mentions pain. These hands have become instruments of perception as much as tools for treatment. You remove your gloves as you sit beside the elderly woman's bed. The leather, supple from years of use, makes a soft sound as you place it on the small wooden table nearby. Your hands emerge, neither soft nor rough, but somewhere in between, bearing evidence of your dual existence, the careful work with delicate herbs and the practical labor of gardening, gathering, grinding, and preparing. The contrast has always seemed right to you, a physical reminder that healing requires both gentleness and strength, both precision and endurance. The morning light filters through the willow branches outside, casting dappled patterns across the worn quilt. In this gentle illumination, you study your own hands briefly before turning your attention to your patient. The lines across your palms have deepened over the years, forming a map of choices made work, undertaken gestures, repeated until they became second nature. A small scar near your thumb reminds you of an early lesson in respecting the sharp edge of harvesting tools. The slight callus on your middle finger marks the spot where your mortar and pestle have pressed thousands of times as you've ground dried herbs to the perfect consistency. They're hurting more with the changing weather, the woman says, extending her own hands toward you, hands that have kneaded, bread-cradled children, planted gardens, and created beautiful weavings for longer than you've been alive. Now they're twisted by arthritis, the knuckles swollen, the once straight fingers permanently curved, like branches shaped by persistent wind. The regular salve helps, but not enough lately. You nod, taking her hands between your own. This simple contact, skin against skin, initiates the relationship between healer and patient. Through this touch, you communicate presence before any remedy is offered. Your hands cradle hers with reverence, acknowledging the life they represent, the work they've accomplished, the pain they now contain. You're careful not to press too firmly against tender joints, yet provide enough contact to convey steadiness and confidence. I've brought something stronger, you say, your voice gentle in the quiet room, with arnica from the high meadow and a bit of willow bark. Your right hand maintains contact with hers, while your left reaches into your bag, finding the correct jar without needing to look. The glass is cool against your fingertips, the lid sealed with beeswax that requires a firm twist to break. These small movements, the retrieval, the opening, have become ritualistic through repetition, allowing your patient time to prepare for what comes next. The salve inside has the consistency of soft butter, pale green with flecks of darker herbs visible throughout. Its scent fills the small room immediately, complex yet subtle, with notes of pine and earth beneath the more pronounced aromas of medicinal herbs. You gather a small amount with 2 fingers, warming it slightly before applying it to her skin. This is where the wisdom of your hands fully emerges. You begin with the lightest touch possible, allowing her skin to become acquainted with your presence. Gradually, you increase pressure, guided not by a predetermined technique, but by the subtle feedback her tissues provide. Where resistance is greatest, you remain longer, using small, circular movements that barely shift your fingertips, yet somehow reach into deeper layers of constriction. Where the skin feels thinner, more vulnerable, you adjust accordingly your pressure, becoming almost imperceptible, yet still effective. Your thumbs find the valleys between tendons, following their natural pathways, like a traveler might follow a river through unfamiliar terrain. You notice how certain areas feel cooler than others, how subtle vibrations sometimes occur beneath your fingertips when you've found precisely the right spot to address. These observations aren't separate from your treatment. They are the treatment, the continuous dialogue between your hands and her body that requires no words, yet communicates volumes. How did you learn to do this? She asks, her voice softer now, as tension begins to release its grip on her hands. The question makes you smile behind your mask. How to explain that your hands learned by failing repeatedly, by causing occasional discomfort, before finding the right approach, by treating hundreds of different bodies until patterns emerged that transcended individual differences. How to convey that the most important skill was learning to quiet your mind enough to let your hands listen. Slowly, you answer simply, very slowly. You continue working in companionable silence. The salve absorbs gradually its herbal compounds, penetrating into tissue to reduce inflammation, while your hands encourage circulation to areas long constricted by pain. You feel small clicks and shift beneath your fingertips, restricted joints finding slightly more freedom, tightened muscles yielding to persistent, gentle pressure. Outside, birds call to one another, and distant sounds of village life create a backdrop to this intimate moment. Inside, there is only breath presence and the ancient language of touch that predates all spoken words. Your hands move with unhurried confidence, finding each restriction without needing conscious direction, addressing each area with the precise quality of touch it requires. When you finally withdraw your hands, nearly half an hour has passed, though it feels like both moments and hours simultaneously. The transformation is visible. Her fingers rest more easily against the quilt. The angry redness around certain joints has diminished. Her face shows the particular relaxation that comes when persistent pain grants even temporary reprieve. Leave the jar, you instruct, closing it carefully and placing it within easy reach on her bedside table. Morning and evening, using about this much. you demonstrate the proper amount between finger and thumb and keep your hands warm, especially at night. She nods, understanding the practical instructions, but also recognizing the deeper message beneath them, that her hands, despite their limitations, remain worthy of care. That pain, while persistent, can be addressed rather than merely endured. That attention itself has healing properties beyond any salve or tincture. You replace your gloves before gathering your bag, the leather cool against skin, warmed by healing work. Your hands return to their protected state, ready for the journey to your next patient. For different work they will be called to perform. They carry the memory of this encounter, adding it to the vast library of touch experiences they have collected over years of practice, and will be slightly wiser when next called upon to address similar suffering. As you prepare to leave, the elderly woman catches your gloved hand briefly in her own, a gesture of gratitude more eloquent than words. Your hands recognize this communication, instantly responding with a gentle squeeze that acknowledges the connection between you, the trust extended and honored. These hands that heal have become more than merely yours. They've become instruments of something larger than your individual knowledge or skill. In moments of self-doubt, you sometimes wonder if it is your remedies that heal, or simply the focused attention, the human connection, the unspoken assurance that suffering has been witnessed and addressed with care. Perhaps the answer lies somewhere between these possibilities, in the integration of knowledge with presence, technique with intuition, individual skill with collective wisdom. You step back into the morning light, closing the cottage door gently behind you. Your hands, now hidden beneath leather gloves, tingle slightly from their recent work, alive with the particular satisfaction that comes from being fully utilized for their intended purpose. They adjust your bag automatically, check that your mask sits properly, and prepare for the next home, the next form of suffering, the next opportunity to translate knowledge into touch, concern into relief. The village continues its daily rhythm around you. Your hands prepare to meet it. Words have weight in your profession, a truth you discovered early in your apprenticeship when you watched your teacher speak to patients with such precise care that her language itself seemed medicinal. Now, after years of practice, you understand this principle in your bones, that words like herbs must be selected with intention, prepared thoughtfully, and administered in appropriate measure to achieve their healing effect. You approach the small cottage near the village center, where smoke rises in a thin, uncertain line from the chimney. Inside waits a young man confined to bed for nearly 2 weeks with a fever that rises and falls like an unpredictable tide. His mother meets you at the door, her face bearing the particular pallor that comes from too many nights of interrupted sleep, too many days of sustained worry. "He was cooler this morning," she says immediately, leading you through the modest front room to where her son lies beneath a patchwork quilt. "But he's barely eating." You nod, acknowledging her report, without immediately responding. Sometimes silence creates space for more important words to emerge. You settle yourself on the wooden stool beside the bed, observing the young man's breathing, the flush across his cheekbones, the slight tremor in his hands, resting atop the blanket, his eyes open at your presence, clear, but weighted with exhaustion. How does today feel compared to yesterday? You ask your voice, gentle but matter of fact. You've learned to avoid questions that can be answered with a simple good or bad, preferring those that invite description, that acknowledge the patient's authority over their own experience. The room stops spinning when I sit up now. He answers, his voice raspy from disuse. But my dreams are still strange, vivid and confusing. He pauses, searching for words, and I'm tired of being tired. You remove your gloves and press your palm against his forehead, still warm, but not alarmingly so. His pulse beneath your fingertips tells a similar story, stronger than during your last visit, though not yet returned to its healthy rhythm. These physical observations confirm what his words have already suggested: improvement, but not yet recovery. Your body is working very hard, you tell him, choosing each word deliberately, not "you're still sick" or "you're getting better," both of which would reduce a complex process to an oversimplified state. The fever is your ally, though, an exhausting one. It's helping clear what doesn't belong. His mother stands nearby, her hands restlessly smoothing her apron. "But it's been so long," she says, worry evident in each syllable. "Thomas at the mill was sick for just 3 days with something similar." You turn slightly toward her, acknowledging her concern while being careful not to shift your primary attention away from your patient. Each body finds its own path through illness. You explain your tone, confident but never dismissive. Some journeys are quicker, others more thorough. You pause, allowing the words to settle. His strength is returning. The fever is less intense. These are the signposts we follow. You've learned to avoid absolute pronouncements. Never, "You'll be fully recovered by week's end," or "This is nothing to worry about." Such statements, when contradicted by reality, damage not only your credibility, but more importantly, the patient's trust in their body's communication. Instead, you name what is observable, what is likely what deserves attention, creating a shared reality that neither minimizes suffering nor magnifies fear. From your bag, you remove a small glass bottle filled with amber liquid. 4 drops in, water morning and evening. You instruct, demonstrating the proper amount by holding the dropper above your palm. It's bitter, made from the bark of the white willow and roots gathered at the river bend. It will help manage the fever and ease the aching in your joints. You've found that explaining the origins of your remedies serves multiple purposes. It connects the patient to the natural world, even when they're confined indoors. It acknowledges their right to understand what they're consuming, and it subtly reminds them that healing substances come from ordinary places, plants that have survived countless seasons and adapted to challenging conditions. A living metaphor for resilience. "When can I return to work?" the young man asks the question, revealing his underlying worry more clearly than any description of physical symptoms. Here, you must navigate carefully. False hope would be unkind, but so would unnecessary discouragement. Your body will tell you when it's ready. You begin holding his gaze steadily, first for short periods, then gradually longer. Likely within the week you'll feel the desire to be upright more than horizontal. You smile slightly, behind your mask, though your eyes convey the expression. The challenge won't be starting work again, but stopping before exhaustion reclaims the progress you've made. You turn to his mother, whose anxiety has visibly lessened during your visit. Clear broth continues to be excellent, you affirm, validating her care thus far. And perhaps tomorrow, introduce something more substantial. The root vegetables are particularly nourishing now. You reach into your bag and offer a small bundle of dried herbs. These can be steeped for tea between meals. They'll help restore what the fever has depleted. She accepts the bundle, bringing it briefly to her nose and closing her eyes at the subtle fragrance. "Thank you," she says simply, a phrase you've heard countless times, yet never take for granted. These two words contain multitudes: acknowledgement of your effort, appreciation for your knowledge, relief at sharing responsibility for a loved one's well-being, gratitude for being seen in her own fatigue and worry. "I'll return in 2 days." You promise, gathering your bag and replacing your gloves. Sooner, if needed. This last addition is important. It places control partly in their hands, acknowledging that they are capable of evaluating changes and seeking help appropriately. As you prepare to leave, you pause at the bedside once more. The body remembers how to be well. You tell the young man, your voice quiet but certain. Your task is patience, attention, and trust in that remembering. These words aren't merely reassurance. They express your deepest understanding of healing, that your remedies don't create health, but rather support the body's inherent movement toward balance, that recovery follows its own timeline rather than human expectation, that the most profound healing often happens in invisible increments rather than dramatic moments. Outside again, you breathe deeply, letting the fresh air clear your lungs and mind before your next visit. The words you've spoken remain in that small cottage, continuing their work in your absence. You've seen this phenomenon repeatedly, how the right words at the right moment can reduce fear, inspire confidence, redirect attention from what is lost to what remains possible. This isn't magic or manipulation. It's simply the power of truth offered with compassion, of experience shared without pretense. You've learned, too, about the words to avoid those that create unnecessary alarm, that make promises beyond your control, that oversimplify complex processes, that inadvertently shame patients for their natural responses to illness or injury. Each of these lessons came through experience, through seeing hope fade in someone's eyes, after too confident a prediction, through witnessing how certain phrases could unintentionally diminish a patient's agency in their own recovery. The village square lies ahead, busy now with mid-morning activities. You adjust your mask slightly, preparing to navigate the more public portion of your rounds. Your bag feels somewhat lighter against your hip. Remedies distributed, but also the particular lightness that comes from knowing your words were well chosen, that they will continue offering support even as you turn your attention elsewhere. In your training, you learned about herbs and tinctures, about the body's systems and common ailments, about dosages and contraindications. But this other knowledge, this careful cultivation of healing language, came primarily through observation and reflection, through attending as carefully to the effect of your words, as you do to the effect of your remedies. It remains one of the most challenging aspects of your work, yet also one of the most profound. This recognition that in moments of vulnerability, words become especially potent, capable of either deepening suffering or illuminating paths toward relief. You continue toward your next destination, already mentally preparing the particular vocabulary each patient might need. Different words for the blacksmith's child, with persistent nightmares for the midwife, recovering from a difficult birth for the carpenter, whose hands tremble slightly, with the early signs of an illness you can ease but not cure. Each conversation will require its own medicine, its own careful selection from the pharmacy of language you've developed through years of practice. The words you choose matter. This knowledge accompanies you on every journey through the village, as essential to your healing practice as any remedy carried in your leather bag. Midday finds you in the quietest corner of the village, where 3 cottages stand slightly apart from the others, their gardens more wild, their walls more weathered. Few villagers come to this area without specific purpose, not from fear exactly, but from a collective understanding that some forms of suffering ask for space rather than community, for boundaries that protect necessary solitude. The cottage, at the very edge, partially embraced by an ancient oak whose branches create perpetual shade, belongs to a woman who arrived in the village 5 winters ago. She speaks rarely and ventures into the village center only when absolutely necessary, her eyes focused on some middle distance that others instinctively respect. Rumors accompanied her arrival, whispers of tragedy, of loss too profound to be carried in everyday conversation. These stories faded over time, replaced by simple acceptance of her need for seclusion. You knock at her door with the particular gentleness reserved for those whose defenses serve necessary purposes. Inside, you know the rooms are meticulously ordered, every object assigned its proper place, surfaces polished to gleaming, not from vanity, but from the comfort found in controlling small environments when larger ones have proven uncontrollable. She opens the door just enough to confirm your identity before stepping back, a silent invitation to enter. The interior is cool and dim, scented with beeswax and dried lavender. Though you've visited monthly for years, bringing remedies for her persistent headaches and occasional sleeplessness, she always receives you with the same formal distance, courteous nod hands clasped at her waist eyes that meet yours briefly before finding safer focus elsewhere. The tincture helped, she says, without preamble, her voice low and measured, but only for a few hours at a time. You nod unsurprised. Her headaches have proven resistant to most remedies, emerging from causes more complex than physical tension or simple inflammation. I've brought something different today, you tell her, keeping your own voice, gentle but matter-of-fact, matching her preference for directness without unnecessary elaboration. From your bag, you remove a small ceramic pot sealed with dark wax. This is meant for your temples and the base of your skull. You explain breaking the seal and offering the container for her inspection, a small amount like this. You demonstrate on your own wrist, showing how the pale salve becomes nearly transparent when spread thinly across skin. She accepts the pot with careful hands examining its contents with the particular focus she brings to all new objects in her carefully maintained environment. The salve carries a subtle scent, hints of wintergreen, beneath deeper notes of frankincense obtained through careful trade with traveling merchants. You watch as she registers this fragrance, her expression unchanging, yet somehow communicating approval. May I? You ask, gesturing toward her forehead, where tension has created a permanent line between her brows. This request for permission is especially important here, in this space where boundaries provide essential security. She hesitates, then inclines her head slightly. Consent, given though not verbalized. With gentle fingers, you apply a small amount of the salve to her temples, using the circular motion that encourages absorption and increases effectiveness. Her skin is cool beneath your touch, slightly rigid with the chronic tension she carries. You work slowly, respectful of her limited tolerance for physical contact, attentive to the subtle signals her body provides about what is helpful and what might be too much. It warms, she observes, mild surprise coloring her voice. Yes, you confirm. Gradually, and then a slight cooling sensation follows. You complete the application and step back, restoring the personal space she values. Twice daily would be ideal, more if the pain intensifies. She nods, once decisive, and places the ceramic pot on her small wooden table, with mathematical precision, aligning it with the table's edge. This careful placement of objects, this creation of the visual order, is part of how she manages to continue functioning despite what she carries. You've witnessed similar patterns in others who have endured profound disruption. This need to create external stability when internal landscapes remain turbulent. Is there anything else you require? She asks the formality of her speech. Another boundary, another protection. You consider the question, carefully sensing an opening where there might be space for something more than the usual brief medical exchange. Perhaps some of your lavender, you suggest, nodding toward the bundles, hanging from her rafters, dried to perfection in the cool shade of her cottage. For an elderly patient having trouble sleeping, yours seems especially potent this season. This request serves multiple purposes. It acknowledges her expertise with plants, offers connection through shared knowledge rather than personal disclosure, and most importantly, allows her to give something rather than only receive, a subtle rebalancing of the relationship between healer and patient. Something shifts in her posture, a nearly imperceptible relaxation around her shoulders, a momentary softening around her mouth. The south-facing slope produced the strongest flowers this year, she says, reaching for shears kept on a high shelf. The afternoon sun, followed by evening shade, seems to concentrate the oils. You watch as she selects specific stems from different bundles, assessing each with expert attention before making her cut. Her movements are precise, economical, yet contain a grace that emerges whenever she works with plants. In these moments, engaged with the natural world she understands so well, she appears almost at peace, her focus external rather than turned toward whatever memories normally occupy her thoughts. Perfect timing for harvest is essential, she continues, wrapping the selected stems in a small square of clean linen. Too early, and the oils haven't fully developed. Too late after the flowers have begun to fade, and much is lost. She secures the bundle with a length of thin twine, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency. Most people wait too long, I think. You accept the bundle with appropriate appreciation, acknowledging both the material gift and the rarer offering of her knowledge. Thank you, you say simply. This will help more than you know. She meets your eyes briefly, a flash of connection, before her gaze slides away again. The headaches are worse at night, she says, after a moment, returning to her own situation with reluctance but necessary honesty. When there's nothing else to focus on, this admission, this small glimpse into her experience, is offered with the same careful precision as the lavender bundle. You receive it with equal care, neither pursuing more disclosure than she wishes to give, nor dismissing what has been entrusted to you. The salve can be reapplied whenever needed, you tell her, even multiple times through the night. And perhaps, you pause considering, perhaps a candle nearby, something to focus on other than the pain, a small contained light in the darkness. She doesn't respond immediately, but you notice how she glances toward her small hearth, where several hand-dipped candles stand ready for use. I'll consider it, she says finally, which from her is neither dismissal nor mere politeness, but genuine acknowledgement of your suggestion. Your visit concludes with the same formal efficiency that characterized its beginning, yet something subtle has shifted in the quality of silence between you. This, too, is healing work, not the dramatic recovery celebrated in village stories, but the quiet maintenance of dignity and function despite ongoing suffering, the gradual building of trust between one who carries invisible wounds and one who recognizes their existence without demanding their display. Outside, once more you pause beneath the sheltering oak, allowing your eyes to readjust to brighter light. The village spreads before you, smoke rising from cooking fires, laundry hanging in colorful rows between cottages, children visible in the distance, playing their eternal games of chase and discovery. From this vantage point, life appears simple, predictable, benign, yet you know better. Behind solid doors and tidy gardens, each home contains its own particular shadow, its grief remembered or anticipated, its unspoken fears, its private disappointments. These shadows aren't failures or aberrations, they're as much a part of human experience as joy or satisfaction. Your work takes you into these shaded areas, not to eliminate darkness, an impossible and perhaps undesirable task, but to help others find ways of living with it, of containing it within boundaries that allow life to continue around. And despite it, you adjust your bag and continue along the path that leads back toward the village center. The lavender bundle nestles safely inside its fragrance, occasionally rising when your movement disturbs the air around it. This small exchange, herbs for knowledge, presence for trust, represents healing in its most fundamental form, connection that honors both shared humanity and individual experience, that recognizes suffering without assuming it constitutes the entirety of any person's reality. The shadows rest differently in each home you visit. Your task is not to dispel them, but to acknowledge their presence, while remembering that light exists alongside them, sometimes as bright as midday sun, sometimes as subtle as a single candle. Flame kept burning through the darkest hours of night. The village square hums with afternoon activity as you emerge from the narrow side street. Here, surrounded by the oldest buildings, generations of daily life have unfolded in predictable patterns that provide both structure and comfort to those who call this place home. Children chase each other around the ancient well, their laughter punctuating the steady rhythm of commerce and conversation. Women gather near the communal ovens, their hands working steadily as they prepare food while exchanging the day's observations. Men repair tools or discuss the weather's impact on crops, their voices rising and falling in the familiar cadence of shared concerns. You pause at the edge of this scene, momentarily invisible in your observer's role. Though you've lived here all your life, were born in a cottage, not 20 paces from where you now stand, your position as healer creates a particular relationship with the community, deeply connected, yet slightly apart, integral, yet set aside for a specific purpose that occasionally requires distance. The blacksmith notices you, first raising a soot-stained hand in greeting. Still making your rounds, he calls his voice carrying easily across the square. His question contains genuine interest, but also serves to alert others to your presence, a courtesy extended to someone whose time is considered valuable, whose attention might be needed elsewhere at any moment. You nod, adjusting your mask slightly as you step fully into the square. A few more visits before evening. You confirm your voice pitched to Carrie, just far enough for him to hear, without shouting your response to the entire gathering. This balance, being accessible without becoming the center of attention, has taken years to perfect. As if summoned by your voice, the baker's wife approaches, wiping flour-covered hands on her apron. "My mother's cough has returned," she says, without preamble concern, evident in her furrowed brow. "Not as bad as midwinter, but still, I'll come by before sunset. You promise." Mentally rearranging your planned route to include this additional visit. Such adjustments are constant in your work. The theoretical order of your day regularly reshaped by new urgencies, by worsening symptoms, by the community's shifting needs. She nods gratefully and returns to her work, confidence restored by nothing more substantial than your promised presence. This faith sometimes feels like an impossible responsibility to carry. Other times, it seems the greatest privilege imaginable, to be so trusted, so integral to the collective well-being of people you've known your entire life. An older man sitting on a bench beneath the old linden tree catches your eye and pats the empty space beside him, an invitation impossible to misinterpret. This is Willem, once the village's finest stonemason, now relegated to observer status by hands too gnarled by arthritis to hold his former tools. His knowledge remains intact, however, and younger workers still seek his advice on particularly challenging projects. You join him briefly, understanding that sometimes your presence itself serves as medicine. Not every healing interaction requires herbs or tinctures or formal examination. The new bridge support looks solid, you comment, nodding toward the construction, visible at the village's edge. Knowing his opinion was surely consulted during its design. Good stone, he agrees, satisfaction evident in his voice. Should outlast everyone currently walking across it. He studies your face above your mask, his faded blue eyes still sharp with intelligence. You look tired today. He observes the directness of age, unconcerned with social niceties. You smile slightly behind your mask, neither confirming nor denying his assessment. Willem has known you since childhood, has watched your transition from curious apprentice to confident practitioner. His concern comes from genuine affection rather than idle curiosity. Many need attention with the season changing. You say simply. He nods, accepting this explanation without pursuing details you cannot ethically share. Patient confidentiality remains sacred. In your practice, a boundary the village generally respects, despite its otherwise interconnected nature. Marta sent some bread home with my grandson yesterday, he says instead, changing the subject. Said it might help with my stomach troubles. Has it? You inquire, genuinely interested in whether the simple remedy you suggested to the baker's wife has provided relief for the persistent digestive issues Willem mentioned during your last visit to his cottage. Seems to. He confirms with a small shrug that simultaneously acknowledges the benefit while maintaining the particular stoicism common among the village's older men, an ingrained reluctance to admit physical vulnerability despite their willingness to seek help when truly needed. This brief exchange represents a fundamental aspect of village medicine, often overlooked by more formal healing traditions, the network of informal care that surrounds and supports your professional practice. The baker's wife, upon hearing of Willem's complaint, adapts her baking to include ingredients you've mentioned might help. Willem's grandson, though a young, takes responsibility for delivering this modified bread to his grandfather's home. Neither expects recognition or payment. Both understand their actions as simple contributions to collective well-being. You've come to see your formal practice as merely the most visible thread in a complex tapestry of care that encompasses the entire village. The midwife, who checks on new mothers for weeks after birth, the carpenter who builds special chairs for those with back problems, the fisherman who ensures the elders receive the most easily digestible portion of each catch, all participate in maintaining community health, often in ways so integrated into daily life they're barely recognized as deliberate choices. A small commotion near the well draws your attention. A young boy has fallen, his palms scraped on the rough stone. His mother kneels beside him, murmuring comfort as she examines the injury. She glances up, meets your gaze across the square, then returns to her son with confident movements, checking for deeper damage, wiping away blood and dirt with the edge of her apron, applying gentle pressure to stop minor bleeding. You remain seated, recognizing that your intervention isn't necessary. Years ago, you demonstrated proper wound cleaning technique to a group of parents gathered in this very square. Now this knowledge has become community property passed between neighbors, integrated into ordinary responses to minor injuries. Not every wound requires a healer. Not every healing action requires specialized knowledge. This perhaps represents your greatest achievement, not the lives saved through dramatic intervention, though there have been some, but this gradual elevation of the village's collective capacity to care for itself. Your knowledge, carefully shared over years of practice, has seeped into daily interactions, strengthened existing connections, empowered individuals to respond effectively to common ailments without immediate dependence on your skills. Willem follows your gaze to the scene by the well, now concluding with the boy standing again, tears drying on flushed cheeks as his mother brushes dust from his clothes. "Remember when that was you?" the old man asks, amusement coloring his voice. "Always climbing where you shouldn't, always in motion. You do remember? Not the specific falls, perhaps, but the general sense of boundless energy that characterized your childhood, the insatiable curiosity that eventually directed itself toward healing arts rather than other possible paths. Some things don't change. You acknowledge, thinking of the plants you still climb slopes, to gather the journeys you undertake to remote areas where rare medicinal herbs grow, and some do. Willem counters his gaze, moving meaningfully toward your mask, your leather bag, the symbols of responsibility you've assumed of knowledge, earned through years of dedicated study and practice. For the better, mostly, this simple affirmation warms you unexpectedly. The path you've chosen involves certain solitudes, certain burdens others cannot fully comprehend. Yet in moments like this, you're reminded that the village sees you, not just your function or your skills, but your growth, your dedication, your fundamental humanity beneath professional identity. The church bell rings, once marking mid-afternoon. This gentle reminder of passing time prompts you to stand your body momentarily stiff from even this brief rest. "The baker's mother won't wait forever," you say, adjusting your bag against your hip. Willem nods, understanding priorities that need no explanation. "Go on then," he says, waving you away with comfortable familiarity. Some of us have the luxury of sitting still all afternoon. You leave him there beneath the linden tree, a stationary figure in the square's continuing movement. As you cross toward the baker's cottage, you exchange brief greeting with others, a nod to the cooper, mending barrels outside his workshop, a quick question about a healing burn from the blacksmith's apprentice, a smile visible only in your eyes, above your mask, for children who pause their game to let you pass. This, then, is the village that holds you, a complex ecosystem of relationships, built through shared history, maintained through daily interaction, strengthened through mutual dependence. It shapes your practice as surely as your formal training did, defining which ailments you see most frequently, influencing which remedies you prepare in largest quantity, determining the delicate balance between professional authority and neighborly familiarity that characterizes your healing work. You reach the baker's cottage and knock gently on the weathered door, already anticipating the particular quality of attention the elderly woman inside will require. Behind you, the village continues its afternoon rhythm, children's voices rising and falling in play hammers, striking in steady percussion from the blacksmith's forge, women calling to one another across the square. These sounds form the backdrop of your practice, the constant reminder that healing never happens in isolation, but always within the context of ongoing life of community, that both creates need for your skills and makes their application possible. The door opens. You step across another threshold, carrying with you not just herbs and knowledge, but the invisible strength of belonging, of being one essential thread in a fabric much larger and more enduring than any individual life it comprises. Evening approaches as you complete your final scheduled visit, stepping out from a small cottage near the village mill. The quality of light has shifted while you worked inside, transforming from the clear brightness of afternoon to the softer gold that precedes sunset. Shadows stretch longer, now reaching across the narrow street like fingers drawing everything gradually toward night. This daily transition, this gentle dimming, always affects your perception, making the familiar village appear slightly altered, inviting different observations than those available in harsher daylight. You pause, allowing your senses to adjust to the change. The air feels cooler against your skin, carrying new scents. Wood smoke from cooking fires, the sweet decay of fallen leaves, the particular mineral smell of the stream that flows more vigorously after recent rains. Sounds shift with evening's approach as well, work noises diminishing. As tools are set aside, children's voices moving indoors, conversations adopting the quieter tones that accompany day's end. Your body registers this transition with its own responses, a slight heaviness in your limbs after hours of movement, a deepening of your breath, as if preparing for the stillness to come, a heightened awareness of hunger after attention directed outward all day. These physical sensations remind you of your own participation in natural rhythms that govern all life, regardless of human constructs or intentions. As you start the walk toward home, you notice an older woman sitting alone on a stone bench outside her cottage. Margareta, once the village's most sought-after midwife, now well into her 8th decade, watches your approach with eyes that remain sharp despite her advancing years. Her hands rest on a walking stick, placed carefully between her knees, its wood polished by years of use. "Busy day?" she asks, as you draw near. Her voice, carrying the slight roughness age has added to once smooth tones. You nod, adjusting your course to join her briefly. Though technically no longer your teacher, Margareta continues to offer wisdom accumulated through decades of practice, observations impossible to find in any text, insights earned through direct experience, with hundreds of patients through multiple generations. Spending time in her presence remains one of your most valued forms of continuing education. Seasonal transitions always increase the workload. You answer, settling beside her on the cool stone. Especially for respiratory complaints. She nods, unsurprised. Same when I was practicing. Bodies resist change, even necessary ones. Her gaze moves toward the distant mountains, partially obscured now by evening mist. Though some seemed to manage better than others, even with similar constitutions, never could fully explain that. This admission, this acknowledgement of mystery persisting despite extensive knowledge, represents one of Margareta's most valuable teachings. Throughout your apprenticeship, she emphasized the importance of recognizing limits, of maintaining humility before the body's complex wisdom, of understanding that healing involves partnership with forces not fully comprehensible through rational analysis alone. Willem's stomach is improving with a special bread you offer, knowing she maintains interest in patients she once treated herself, though she no longer actively practices. Good, good, she murmurs, satisfaction evident in her tone. Simple solutions often work best if we're wise enough to try them first instead of last. She shifts slightly on the bench, adjusting her position with the careful movements age requires. And the blacksmith's daughter, the nightmares, lessening, you confirm. The dream sachet helps, but I think it's the evening ritual that makes the real difference. The consistency, the attention from both parents, the sense of protection it creates. Margarita nods, a smile briefly softening the deep lines etched around her mouth. You've learned well, she says simply. This sparse praise offered without elaboration carries more weight than effusive compliments might from someone else. Margareta has never wasted words or offered false reassurance. Her acknowledgement of growth or skill always corresponds precisely to what she genuinely observes. You sit together in comfortable silence as the light continues its gradual transformation. A young couple passes by nodding respectfully to both of you before continuing toward the village center. You notice how the young woman's hand rests protectively over her slightly rounded belly, a gesture as old as humanity, transcending culture and time. First child, Margareta comments after they've passed beyond hearing, came to me last month for confirmation, though she already knew. Some always do, can sense the change almost immediately. You nod, having observed this phenomenon yourself, how some women possess an almost preternatural awareness of their body's transitions while others remain uncertain until physical evidence becomes undeniable. These variations in self-perception fascinate you, representing one of countless individual differences that make standardized treatment insufficient, that require healers to adjust approaches based on each patient's unique relationship with their physical experience. She's worried about the birth. Margareta continues her experienced eye, having caught nuances in the young woman's posture, invisible to less trained observation. First-time mothers always are, but she's strong, wide-hipped, should manage well enough. This assessment, this prediction based on decades of attending births in this same village, carries no arrogance, no claim of absolute certainty. Margarita has witnessed too many surprises, too many expectations overturned by body's actual performance during labor to offer guarantees. Yet her experienced evaluation provides valuable perspective, a contextualizing of normal anxiety within probable outcomes based on observable factors. I'll keep extra raspberry leaf tea prepared, you note mentally, adding this to your list of remedies requiring replenishment. The herbs help tone the uterus before birth, potentially easing labor. For first-time mothers, one of many traditional preparations proven effective through generations of observed results rather than formal studies. Margarita nods approvingly, then returns her gaze to the mountains. Miss it sometimes, she admits after another comfortable silence. The work, the purpose. She gestures vaguely toward her knees. Body had other ideas, though. The arthritis that ended her active practice came gradually, joint by joint, movement by movement, until climbing stairs to reach birthing chambers or kneeling for hours beside laboring women became impossible, despite her undiminished knowledge and skill. You witnessed this transition during your apprenticeship, her growing discomfort disguised with professional stoicism, her eventual recognition that continuing would endanger both herself and those she sought to help her difficult decision to recommend you as her replacement, despite your relative youth. Still teaching, though, you observe quietly, still healing through what you've shared. She acknowledges this with a small tilt of her head, neither false modesty nor self-congratulation, but simple recognition of continuity extending beyond individual practice. Her knowledge lives on in your hands, in your assessment of patients, in remedies you prepare according to her carefully transmitted recipes. This transmission, this passing of wisdom from experienced practitioner to dedicated student, ensures that valuable insights aren't lost when individual healers can no longer actively practice. The first stars appear overhead, faint points of light emerging as darkness gradually claims the sky. Margareta sighs softly and begins the careful process of standing using her walking stick for balance. As she rises from the stone bench, you offer a supportive hand beneath her elbow, which she accepts without comment. Another transition, managed with dignity, another adjustment to physical limitation, incorporated into daily experience. "Come by tomorrow if you have time," she says, once steady on her feet. "Found some old notes about treating winter coughs. Different approach than what I taught you originally. Worth considering before the cold sets in fully." You promise to visit, knowing her old notes likely contain valuable observations recorded during particularly challenging winters. Perhaps approaches tested during harsh seasons when standard remedies proved insufficient or variations developed for patients with specific vulnerabilities. This ongoing exchange of information, this continuing education from someone whose active practice has ended, represents another aspect of village medicine that more formal systems often lack: the preservation of experienced practitioners' wisdom even after their direct treatment of patients concludes. As Margareta turns toward her cottage door, you notice how the evening light softens the evidence of time's passage on her face and hands, momentarily restoring a glimpse of the younger woman who first taught you to identify medicinal plants, to feel for subtle variations in pulse rhythms, to recognize the unspoken concerns beneath stated complaints. That woman remains present within her older self, not lost to time, but transformed by it, her knowledge deepened by decades of practice, her understanding enriched by personal experience of aging's gradual limitations. You continue your journey homeward, aware of similar processes occurring within your own body and mind, imperceptible, daily changes, accumulating toward eventual transformation, knowledge, expanding through repeated application, perspective, shifting through accumulated experience. Time takes physical resilience, unblemished skin, perfect recall, ease of movement, but it gives to deeper understanding, recognition of patterns, appreciation for subtlety, patience with complexity. The village settles around you as darkness claims more territory from fading light. Lamps glow in windows, creating pools of warmth that punctuate growing shadows. You adjust your mask, feeling the familiar pressure against your face. Another sensation transformed by time, from initial discomfort to unnoticed necessity. Your bag, considerably lighter now, after a day of distributing remedies, shifts against your hip with each step. Tomorrow you'll visit Margareta, will examine her notes with the respect they deserve, will likely incorporate her additional knowledge into your own practice. This conversation across generations, this bridge between past experience and future application, forms another essential thread in the complex tapestry of healing, as you understand it, not a static body of knowledge, but a living tradition adapting to changing circumstances while maintaining connection to accumulated wisdom from those who worked before you arrived and will continue after you depart. The path leads homeward. Evening deepens around you. Time continues its steady work, taking and giving, removing, and providing, creating space for whatever comes next. Night has fully claimed the sky by the time you reach your cottage at the village edge. Stars punctuate the darkness. Overhead, their familiar patterns offering silent companionship as you approach your door. The solitude waiting inside differs fundamentally from the isolation that characterizes illness or exile. This is separation freely chosen, privacy deliberately maintained as essential to your healing practice. Your key turns in the lock with a satisfying click, the sound signaling transition from public role to private existence. Inside, darkness waits, not threatening, but expectant, like a question requiring response. You move through familiar space without immediate need for light, your body remembering the exact location of table edges, chair backs, the slight step down into your main room. This physical memory, this intimate knowledge of your personal territory, provides its own comfort after a day spent navigating others' spaces, adapting to different homes with their particular arrangements and atmospheres. Only when you've placed your bag on its designated hook and removed your gloves and mask do you strike a match, touching flame to the candle waiting on your small wooden table. Light blooms outward, casting your immediate surroundings in gentle illumination while leaving corners in comfortable shadow. The single flame creates more than mere visibility. It establishes presence, transforms empty space into inhabited place, welcomes you back to your own carefully constructed world. You exhale fully, perhaps for the first time since morning, a release of breath held subtly throughout the day's responsibilities. Here alone, with the quiet companionship of familiar objects, you need maintain no professional demeanor, need project, no confident certainty, need attend to no one's needs but your own. This necessary unburdening allows restoration impossible in more public contexts. The cottage remains precisely as you left it this morning. Herbs hanging from ceiling beams in ordered rows, books stacked according to frequency of consultation work table, clean and waiting for tomorrow's preparations. This predictable stability provides essential counterbalance to the variable demands of your practice, where each day brings unexpected challenges requiring immediate adaptive response. You light the small stove with practiced efficiency, adding just enough kindling to create sufficient warmth without excessive heat. While flames establish themselves, you pour water from a covered pitcher into your copper kettle, the liquid catching candlelight as it arcs through air. These simple actions, creating warmth, preparing sustenance, connect you to fundamental human experiences that transcend your specific role, that remind you of shared needs beneath specialized knowledge. As the water heats, you change from the clothes that have accompanied you through the village, garments now carrying traces of others' homes, others' concerns, perhaps even microscopic evidence of their illnesses. The clean shirt you select from your small dresser smells faintly of lavender from the sachet tucked among folded fabrics. This transition from public costume to private comfort marks another boundary between professional identity and personal existence. The kettle's gentle whistle calls you back to the stove. You prepare a simple tea using herbs selected not for medicinal properties, but purely for pleasure, a small luxury that acknowledges the importance of enjoyment alongside functionality. This distinction between what heals and what simply delights maintains necessary balance in your relationship with the natural world that provides your remedies. Steam rises from the cup as you carry it to your favorite chair near the window. Outside, the village has largely surrendered to night's dominion. Only a few windows still show lamplight, mostly from homes where new babies dictate different rhythms, or where illness requires ongoing attention. The contrast between community, bustle, and your private quiet creates space for reflection, impossible during active practice. You sip your tea slowly, allowing warmth to travel through your body, encouraging muscles to release accumulated tension from the day's physical demands. Your thoughts begin their own unwinding, moving from immediate concerns about specific patients toward broader contemplation of patterns, observed connections noted, questions raised by today's experiences. This solitary reflection constitutes essential professional practice rather than mere personal indulgence. Without such spaces for undirected thought, for processing complex observations, without immediate pressure to form conclusions, your healing work would gradually become mechanical application of established protocols rather than living, evolving response to each unique situation encountered. Your gaze shifts to the small workbench where tomorrow you'll prepare fresh remedies to replace those distributed today. Mason jars containing dried herbs catch occasional glints of candlelight, their contents representing hours of careful gathering, proper drying, meticulous storage. Labels in your precise handwriting identify each substance, both common and Latin names, included from habit formed during apprenticeship years. Beside these familiar ingredients sits something new, a small bundle of unfamiliar mushrooms brought by a traveling merchant last week, purportedly possessing properties that support recovery from deep exhaustion. You've been researching them carefully before incorporating them into any remedy, consulting your reference texts corresponding with a healer in a distant village who has more experience with fungal medicines, conducting small experiments to understand their behavior when dried, powdered, or steeped. This caution, this refusal to employ any substance without thorough understanding of its actions and potential interactions, represents another aspect of your solitary practice, the ongoing study that extends your knowledge beyond what was directly transmitted through apprenticeship. Not all of this learning happens through books or correspondence. Much emerges through careful observation of results, through notes meticulously maintained in journals that line your small bookshelf, through connections gradually perceived between seemingly unrelated phenomena. Your tea finished, you move to your desk and open the current journal, a leather-bound volume nearly half filled with observations recorded in your increasingly confident script. By candlelight, you note today's experiences, the effectiveness of the new salve for arthritis, pain, the persistent nature of the young man's fever, despite apparent improvement in other symptoms, the subtle shift in relationship with the solitary woman at village edge. These records serve not just as reference for future treatments, but as ongoing dialogue with yourself, a conversation about what works, what doesn't, what remains mysterious, despite accumulated knowledge. This documentation, this creation of personal medical literature, happens in similar rooms throughout the region as individual healers record their observations based on local conditions available, materials, particular population needs. Occasionally, when healers gather for rare meetings or correspond through infrequent messages, these individual insights become shared knowledge, a distributed system of medical advancement that depends not on centralized authority, but on collective experience carefully noted and honestly reported. The candle burns lower its flame, occasionally wavering in subtle drafts that find entry despite your best efforts at weatherproofing. This gradual diminishment of light signals progression toward sleep, another transition requiring its own rituals, its own deliberate movement from active engagement toward restorative surrender. You close your journal and stand stretching arms overhead to release final tension from shoulders and back. Tomorrow will bring its own demands, its own unexpected challenges, its own opportunities for both success and failure in your ongoing attempt to ease suffering within your limited sphere of influence. The awareness of these approaching responsibilities might create anxiety if not balanced by tonight's solitude. This protected space where you can acknowledge doubts impossible to express while wearing your professional mask, where you can temporarily set aside the weight of others' dependence on your knowledge and skill. In bed beneath the comfortable weight of woolen blankets, you listen to night sounds that penetrate even solid cottage walls. An owl's distant call, the occasional rustling of small creatures in nearby undergrowth, the barely perceptible murmur of the stream that marks the village boundary. These sounds connect your solitude to larger contexts, natural systems that continue their functions regardless of human concerns, cycles of activity and rest that govern all living things despite individual circumstances. Sleep approaches gradually, thoughts becoming less linear as consciousness begins its nightly release. In this liminal space between waking and dreaming, connections sometimes emerge that elude more directed thinking, insights about treatment, possibilities, recognition of patterns across seemingly different cases, intuitive understandings that complement your more structured knowledge. You surrender to approaching unconsciousness with the same attentiveness you bring to your healing work, neither clinging to wakefulness nor forcing its departure, but observing the natural progression with curious acceptance. This final daily transition from active participation to passive renewal completes the cycle that will begin again with tomorrow's first light. The solitude you choose isn't absence or emptiness, but presence of a different quality, space filled with your own rhythms rather than external demands, silence that allows different voices to emerge, aloneness that restores capacity for meaningful connection. Without these regular returns to private experience, your ability to fully engage with others' suffering would gradually diminish, leaving technical skill intact, but depleting the empathetic presence equally essential to genuine healing. Darkness deepens both outside and within. Sleep claims its temporary dominion. The healer rests, while the village dreams, each preparing in their own way for tomorrow's renewal of shared existence. Dawn arrives differently today, not with the clear, decisive light of yesterday, but with gradual brightening, barely distinguishable from night's final hours. Opening your eyes to this muted illumination, you immediately register the sound of steady rain against your roof, the subtle dampness that penetrates even well-sealed spaces during prolonged precipitation, the particular quality of grayness that transforms familiar objects into softer versions of themselves. You rise with deliberate movements, body slightly stiff from yesterday's exertions, yet restored by night's deep rest. The wooden floor feels cooler beneath your feet, responding to the drop in temperature that accompanied the rain's arrival. Through your window, the village appears transformed. Colors muted, distances altered by falling water, everyday activities modified to accommodate weather's undeniable authority. This change, this meteorological interruption of normal patterns, will reshape your day's work in ways impossible to fully anticipate. Some patients might postpone non-urgent consultations rather than travel through steady rain. Others might develop new symptoms triggered by dampness and chill. Still others might request your visit specifically because weather prevents their usual activities, creating space for treatments previously delayed by busy schedules. You dress with particular attention to practicality, selecting your most water-resistant cloak boots that have proven themselves on muddy paths, layers that can be adjusted as needed when moving between rain-chilled exteriors, and the excessive warmth sometimes created by indoor fires built higher against weather's influence. These preparations acknowledge physical reality without allowing it to become primary focus, a balance similar to your approach with patients where symptoms receive necessary attention without being permitted to obscure the whole person, experiencing them at your small table. Morning tea steams in welcome contrast to the cool air. You sip slowly while consulting your journal, reviewing notes about who most needs attention today, regardless of weather's intervention. The elderly woman with arthritic hands will certainly experience increased discomfort with rising dampness. The blacksmith's child with lingering cough should remain indoors despite likely protests. The young man recovering from fever must be particularly careful during this atmospheric shift. A knock at your door interrupts these reflections, unusual at this early hour, suggesting urgency that overrides social conventions about appropriate timing for visits. You open the door to find the miller's son, perhaps 10 years old, his clothes already soaked, despite the oiled canvas cape that covers his narrow shoulders. His expression, a mixture of importance and anxiety, tells you as much as his words. "My father sent me," he announces, the formal phrasing clearly rehearsed during his journey through rain-slick streets. "The woodcutter's boy fell yesterday. His arm—" The child gestures toward his own arm, bending it at an unnatural angle to illustrate what he lacks precise vocabulary to describe. You nod immediately, understanding both the likely injury, and its treatment requirements. I'll come right away, you assure him, turning back to gather necessary supplies, sturdy splints prepared for exactly such emergencies, clean bandages stored in oiled cloth to protect them from dampness, tincture of willow bark for pain that will intensify during setting and initial healing. The boy shifts impatiently as you secure these items in your bag, eager to fulfill his responsibility by delivering both message and healer as quickly as possible. His obvious concern for speed provides its own information about the situation's perceived urgency by those at the woodcutter's home. However, you maintain deliberate movements. Rushing preparation risks forgetting essential supplies and a broken arm, while painful and rightfully concerning to family members, rarely constitutes the kind of emergency where moments determine outcomes. Did it happen yesterday? You confirm as you secure your bag and reach for your heaviest cloak. This detail matters for treatment. Approach. A fracture left overnight will present differently than one immediately addressed with swelling likely more pronounced and positioning potentially further compromised by unintentional movement during sleep. The boy nods vigorously. Late. Father said they didn't want to disturb you after dark unless the pain got worse. This additional information, this decision to wait through night hours, further clarifies the situation. Significant injury, but not accompanied by complications that would justify midnight summons, such as bone-breaking skin or signs of compromised circulation to the hand. Together, you step into steady rainfall, the boy immediately adopting a pace just short of running. You match his speed, despite knowing that these few extra minutes will make no meaningful difference to treatment outcome. His sense of urgency deserves respect, and the psychological impact of prompt arrival on both injured child and concerned family justifies effort that isn't strictly necessary from purely medical perspective. The woodcutter's cottage stands somewhat apart from the village center, nestled closer to the forest that provides his livelihood. Smoke rises from its chimney in a pale column quickly dispersed by rainfall, suggesting a fire built higher than usual against morning chill. Outside the door, an anxious mother watches for your approach, her relief visible even through the curtain of falling water that separates you until final steps bring you to her threshold. Thank you for coming so quickly, she says, stepping aside to allow your entry. Inside the single room holds multiple occupants, the woodcutter himself standing with uncharacteristic stillness near the hearth, 3 younger children watching wide-eyed from a corner bench, and on the family's only proper bed the injured boy, perhaps 12, his face pale beneath streaks, left by dried tears, his right arm cradled protectively against his chest. Let's have a look, you say, approaching with the calm confidence that experience has taught you provides its own form of medicine in such situations. Fear magnifies pain. Reassurance without false promises can reduce suffering before any physical intervention occurs. You place your bag nearby and sit carefully on the edge of the bed, giving the boy your complete attention rather than immediately focusing on the injured limb. I'm going to help, you tell him directly, establishing relationship. Before initiating examination, first by understanding exactly what happened and what hurts, then by fixing what needs fixing. It won't be comfortable. I won't pretend otherwise. but you'll feel better afterward. Can you tell me how this happened?" The boy glances toward his father before answering, a silent communication you note without commenting upon. "Climbing," he admits finally. "The big oak at Forest Edge. A branch broke." You nod, accepting this information without judgment or unnecessary caution about future behavior. Lessons about risk and consequence have already been delivered more effectively than any verbal instruction could achieve. "And you fell onto your arm or tried to catch yourself with it. Tried to grab another branch on the way down." He explains the technical details, seemingly easier to discuss than the fear that must have accompanied sudden falling. It didn't hold either. This mechanism of injury, grasping while falling, suggests particular fracture patterns more likely than others. You explain your next actions before initiating them. Gentle palpation to locate precise injury site. Careful assessment of swelling and discoloration. Specific questions about sensation in fingers and hand. Each step proceeds with deliberate pace, neither rushed by the audience of concerned family members, nor unnecessarily prolonged to demonstrate thoroughness. Your examination confirms initial suspicion, a simple fracture of both forearm bones, painful and temporarily debilitating, but unlikely to cause permanent limitation if properly treated. No evident compromise to blood vessels or nerves, no breaking of skin by bone fragments, no involvement of complex joint structures. A clean break, despite its undeniable seriousness to the boy experiencing it. It needs straightening and splinting. You explain to both child and parents, maintaining direct honesty without unnecessarily graphic description. The bones will heal well, but we must ensure they're properly aligned first. The father steps forward. "What can we do?" "Hold him steady," you instruct, indicating positions where adult hands will provide both necessary stabilization and comforting presence during the painful process of reduction. The medical term for returning displaced bone ends to proper alignment, and perhaps someone could prepare willow bark tea. It will help with pain afterward. The mother immediately moves toward her cooking area, grateful for practical action to counterbalance helpless witnessing of her child's suffering. You turn to your bag, removing splints and bandages, while continuing to speak calmly to the injured boy, explaining what will happen without dwelling on painful aspects, emphasizing the limited duration of acute discomfort against the backdrop of complete healing to follow. "Ready?" you ask, when preparations are complete. The boy nods tensely, his father's hands now steady on his shoulders, an older sister holding his uninjured hand in silent support. The actual reduction requires both technical skill and emotional steadiness, applying appropriate traction feeling for the subtle shift that indicates proper realignment, maintaining necessary position while beginning splint application. The boy cries out once during the process, but otherwise maintains remarkable composure. For his age, his body instinctively understanding that resistance increases rather than decreases pain during such necessary interventions. Throughout the procedure, you maintain verbal contact, not constant reassurance, which would ring false during moments of intentionally induced pain, but occasional acknowledgement of his experience. The worst part is nearly over, and you're doing exactly what's needed. And finally, We're finishing now, just securing the bandages. When complete, the splinted arm rests across the boy's chest, immobilized in position that optimizes healing while maintaining enough function for limited self-care. You explain necessary precautions during coming weeks, keeping the splint dry, watching for concerning changes in finger color or sensation, managing discomfort through both herbal remedies and positional adjustments. How long until it's completely better? The boy asks, his first voluntary speech since the procedure began. Here, wisdom demands honesty, tempered by recognition of how differently time operates in childhood consciousness. The bones need 6 weeks to grow solid again. You explain using concrete terms rather than abstract concepts. That's until the harvest festival, but discomfort will decrease much sooner. Within days, you'll notice improvement, and within 2 weeks, many activities will be possible again, just with extra care. This temporal framing, connecting abstract duration to known future event, provides context impossible through simple numeric statement. The harvest festival represents something tangible. In the boy's understanding, a future moment he can envision, despite current pain's tendency to collapse perception into endless present. You prepare to leave after ensuring all questions have been answered, all necessary supplies, provided all follow-up instructions clearly understood. The mother presses payment into your hand, 3 eggs, and a small jar of preserved berries, which you accept with appropriate appreciation, despite their objective inadequacy compared to services rendered. Village economics operate on complex principles beyond direct exchange value. Balance occurs across multiple interactions rather than within single transactions. Outside, again, rain continues falling with patient persistence. You adjust your hood and begin the return journey toward village center, where other patients await attention, their needs temporarily superseded by fracture's acute demand, but not forgotten during your diverted absence. The paths have grown muddier during your time indoors, requiring careful attention to footing that prevents complete mental return to other responsibilities until physical navigation becomes secure. This balance, maintaining awareness of immediate physical reality while simultaneously holding broader responsibilities in mind, characterizes much of your practice. Each patient deserves focused presence during direct interaction, yet overall effectiveness requires ongoing attention to larger patterns, to pending commitments, to potential developments, requiring preparation before they manifest as acute needs. The rain falls steadily around you, neither increasing nor decreasing in intensity, a meteorological lesson in sustained attention without dramatic variation. Water follows nature's wisdom, persistent rather than forceful, accumulating effect through consistency rather than intensity, finding paths of least resistance, while gradually reshaping even the most solid obstacles through patient contact. Your own practice has gradually aligned with similar principles, understanding that healing rarely occurs through dramatic intervention alone, but rather through sustained attention, recognizing that gradual processes often yield more enduring results than forced acceleration, appreciating how indirect approaches sometimes resolve situations that direct confrontation would exacerbate. The village square appears ahead, its usual bustle, modified but not eliminated by rainfall. Essential activities continue despite weather's influence. Bread must still be baked. Animals still require tending. Water must still be carried despite water falling freely from sky. This persistence, this continuation of life's fundamental requirements regardless of external conditions, reminds you of body's similar wisdom circulation, maintaining despite injury respiration, continuing through illness, healing processes, initiating without conscious direction. You adjust your path toward the elderly woman's cottage, where arthritic hands will certainly benefit from attention during this damp morning. Your bag, somewhat lighter after supplies left with the woodcutter's family, shifts against your hip with each careful step across rain-slick cobblestones. The day stretches ahead, altered by weather, by unexpected fracture, by conditions impossible to fully anticipate when you first opened your eyes to gray dawn light. The wisdom in waiting for proper healing time, for natural processes to establish their rhythm, for balance to reassert itself when temporarily disrupted, applies not just to patients, but to practitioner as well. Some knowledge arrives only through experience, accumulated over time. Some skills develop only through repeated application. Some understandings emerge only after multiple observations of similar patterns across different situations. Rain continues falling. You continue walking. The day unfolds according to its own wisdom rather than predetermined expectation. Your practice continues within this reality, responding rather than merely imposing, participating rather than merely directing, learning continuously from what presents itself rather than limiting attention to what was anticipated or planned. The next threshold awaits. You adjust your bag and continue forward. Afternoon brings temporary cessation of rainfall, though heavy clouds remain overhead, like unspoken concerns waiting for appropriate moment to release their weight. You stand at the threshold of your cottage, surveying the transformed village landscape, puddles reflecting gray sky in scattered mirrors, tree branches hanging lower with accumulated moisture paths between buildings darkened by persistent dampness that won't quickly yield to brief appearance of watery sunlight. Your morning passed in steady rhythm of patient visitations, each interaction shaped by weather's influence, yet fundamentally focused on individual needs that transcend external conditions. The elderly woman's arthritic hands received extras, attention benefiting from warmed salve that temporarily counteracted dampness-induced stiffness. The blacksmith's child remained indoors as recommended, passing confinement more comfortably with special tea that soothes both cough and restlessness. The young man recovering from fever showed continued improvement despite atmospheric changes that might have triggered relapse in more vulnerable constitution. Now, brief respite between scheduled visits allows momentary return home, not for rest, but for replenishment of supplies depleted during morning's work, particularly splinting materials used for the woodcutter's son. Your stores maintain careful balance between preparedness and excess enough materials to address likely emergencies without accumulating unused remedies that gradually lose potency or attract unwanted attention from insects and rodents attracted to certain herbal compounds. Inside, You move with efficient familiarity through your small workspace, selecting appropriate replacements for your bag, fresh bandages from supply maintained through regular preparation. During evening hours, additional willow bark collected during summer months and properly dried for pain-relieving tea. Small container of pine resin, useful for securing splint bindings when extra stability proves necessary. Each item represents hours of previous work, gathering, processing, storing, with appropriate attention to preservation that makes immediate response possible when acute needs arise. As you organize these materials, a familiar sensation gradually registers in your awareness. Persistent ache across your lower back, intensified by morning's additional physical demands, and weather's dampening influence on muscles already carrying tension from yesterday's exertions. This pain, this personal experience of physical limitation, arrives not as enemy, but as teacher offering insights impossible through intellectual understanding alone. You straighten, placing one hand against the affected area while consciously adjusting your posture to distribute weight more evenly through your body structure. This discomfort represents neither emergency nor insignificant irritation, but rather occupies middle territory, requiring appropriate response without excessive attention. Your relationship with your own pain has evolved through years of practice, moving from initial resistance through reluctant acknowledgement toward current acceptance that incorporates discomfort into wider awareness without allowing it to dominate experience or limit necessary function. This evolution parallels what you attempt to facilitate for patients experiencing chronic or recurring pain, not miraculous elimination of all discomfort, which creates either dependency on increasingly powerful remedies or crushing disappointment when such elimination proves impossible, but rather development of more nuanced relationship with pain itself, understanding its messages, respecting its presence, without unnecessary amplification, discovering how life continues meaningfully despite its accompaniment. You reach for small ceramic jar on shelf above your workbench, salve created specifically for muscular discomfort, its aromatic components immediately recognizable. As you remove the lid, arnica harvested from mountain meadows during brief flowering, period comfrey root dug during proper moon phase to maximize medicinal properties, warming oils infused with cayenne to increase circulation to affected tissues. The remedy's fragrance rises, spicy green, slightly medicinal, as you apply moderate amount to lower back, reaching awkwardly but effectively through years of practice addressing your own physical needs. This self-application, this turning of healing knowledge toward personal experience, provides essential perspective, impossible through theoretical understanding alone. Each remedy you prepare for others has been tested on your own body when appropriate opportunity arose. The bitter digestive tonic when winter foods disturbed normal patterns. The chest salve when autumn cough lingered longer than usual. The headache tea when excessive concentration produced familiar tightening across forehead and temples. These personal experiences inform professional practice in crucial ways beyond mere confirmation of effectiveness. They provide embodied knowledge of subtle distinctions between similar symptoms of how remedies feel during application rather than merely after effects manifest of psychological components that accompany physical discomfort but often remain unexpressed by patients reluctant to appear weak or ungrateful for treatment offered. Warmth spreads gradually across your lower back as the salve's components interact with skin. Initial heating sensation from cayenne, followed by deeper penetration of anti-inflammatory compounds that will gradually reduce muscular tension if given sufficient time to work. You recognize the precise progression from previous applications, can anticipate the temporary intensification that precedes relief, understand from direct experience the patience required between application and noticeable improvement. This waiting, this interval between intervention and result, constitutes another lesson. Pain repeatedly teaches that healing rarely follows dramatic timeline, preferred by human impatience, that most recovery occurs in gradual increments rather than sudden transformations, that expecting immediate results often creates disappointment that compounds original suffering rather than alleviating it. You recapture the salve jar and secure your bag with freshly replenished supplies. The ache in your back remains present, but has already begun subtle shift from sharp distraction toward background awareness, not through magical elimination, but through combination of appropriate remedy, conscious attention to posture, and psychological integration that neither denies discomfort nor magnifies its significance beyond useful proportion. Outside, again, intermittent sunlight breaks through cloud cover in brief, diagonal illumination that transforms ordinary scenes into momentarily extraordinary visions. Raindrops suspended from leaf edges become individual prisms. Puddle surfaces reveal complex patterns created by gentle breezes. Wet cobblestones gleam with temporary luster, soon to fade as drying begins. This transient beauty, this ephemeral transformation of familiar landscape, offers visual counterpart to pain's eventual passage reminder that current experience, however intense, remains subject to inevitable change. Your next patient awaits at the opposite edge of the village, a carpenter whose hands have begun showing early signs of the same deformation that eventually forced his father to abandon the craft that defined his identity and provided family livelihood. This situation requires particular delicacy, balancing honest assessment of progressive condition against devastating impact of prematurely surrendering meaningful work, offering remedies that may temporarily reduce symptoms without creating false expectation of permanent resolution, acknowledging fear that properly belongs to uncertain future without allowing it to consume present functionality. The walk provides time for your own discomfort to continue its gradual transformation from foreground emergency to background information. Each step requires subtle adjustments in response to remaining pain, slightly shorter stride, increased awareness of foot placement on uneven surfaces, occasional pause when momentary intensification suggests need for brief rest rather than continued movement. These modifications happen almost automatically after years of similar experiences, your body having learned appropriate response without requiring conscious calculation for each adjustment. This embodied wisdom, This physical intelligence developed through repeated navigation of limitation represents another gift pain offers when neither rejected through denial nor surrendered to through excessive identification. Your body knows how to continue functioning despite discomfort, how to modify movement without abandoning necessary activity, how to interpret pain's signals without becoming entirely defined by their presence. This knowledge serves not just personal need but professional practice as well, allowing genuine empathy with patients' experiences without projecting personal reactions onto their unique situations. The carpenter's small workshop appears ahead, its door open despite lingering dampness, familiar sounds of mallet against chisel emerging in rhythmic percussion that confirms continuing work despite physical challenges you've observed during recent visits. This persistence, this determination to maintain meaningful activity despite increasing difficulty, inspires particular respect, represents healing approach focused on maintaining function and purpose rather than merely addressing symptoms in isolation. You pause briefly before announcing your presence, observing the carpenter's careful movements as he shapes wood with tools that have become extensions of his hands through decades of daily use. His technique has already begun subtle adaptation to changing physical capacity, slightly modified grip on certain tools, increased use of workbench features that provide stability where hand strength has diminished, occasional pauses that allow brief rest without disrupting overall workflow. These adjustments have emerged not from formal instruction, but from body's inherent intelligence when allowed to communicate its changing needs without judgment or resistance. Good afternoon. You call, finally stepping into visible position at workshop entrance. The carpenter looks up, momentarily startled, before recognition brings welcoming nod. His hands continue their work even as attention shifts toward your arrival. Muscle memory maintaining motion, while conscious awareness engages elsewhere. Demonstration of skill so deeply embedded it requires minimal monitoring. Earlier than expected, he comments, glancing toward sky, visible through open doorway. Weather giving you fewer patients today. Different ones, rather than fewer. You answer, placing your bag on nearby bench with careful movement that accommodates your own persistent discomfort without drawing attention to it. The rain brings its own complaints. He nods, understanding, finally setting tools aside as project reaches natural pausing point. Including these, he acknowledges extending both hands palm upward, in gesture that simultaneously displays physical reality and offers it for professional assessment. The subtle changes since your last visit are visible immediately to experienced observation, slightly increased, swelling around specific joints, minor progression of angular deviation in fingers, previously showing earliest signs of deformation, darkened calluses, where compensatory pressure has increased in response to changing grip patterns. You take his hands between yours, the contact establishing connection that transcends purely technical examination. His skin feels slightly cooler than optimal, circulation already compromised by inflammatory processes that gradually alter joint architecture, despite body's persistent attempts at repair. Your touch remains gentle, yet thorough, respecting both. the expertise these hands represent, and the vulnerability their changing condition creates. The morning stiffness is lasting longer. He reports without prompting partnership, an assessment established through previous visits. And this finger, he indicates right index finger, where changes appear most pronounced. Less reliable now. For fine work. You nod, acknowledging both physical observation and its unspoken implications for someone whose identity and livelihood depend on manual dexterity. Show me what you're making, you request, not changing subject, but rather expanding, context-shifting focus from limitation toward continuing capability that deserves equal acknowledgement. He turns toward workbench, where partially completed cradle takes shape from local maple harvested during proper season to ensure stability and resistance to warping. The design shows both technical mastery and aesthetic sensitivity, practical functionality enhanced by decorative elements that transform utilitarian object into family heirloom, likely to outlast its maker by generations. For my daughter's first child, he explains pride, momentarily overshadowing concern about physical limitations. Due midwinter, this information, this connection between present work and future continuation of a family line, adds essential dimension to treatment considerations. The cradle represents more than mere woodworking project. It embodies transmission between generations, physical manifestation of continuing identity, despite individual mortality, tangible expression of care, extending beyond present limitation toward future possibility. It's beautiful work. You acknowledge genuinely appreciation for craftsmanship, informed by understanding of its deeper significance, and there's time to complete it without rushing. He nods, recognizing implicit message that pacing has become increasingly important as physical capacity changes. That accomplishment remains possible when appropriate modifications accommodate new limitations. That meaning transcends speed of execution or technical perfection alone. From your bag, you remove 2 items, salve similar to what you applied to your own back, but modified for different inflammatory pattern, affecting smaller joints rather than larger muscle groups, and small fabric pouch containing mixture of dried herbs for evening tea, specifically formulated to address both physical discomfort and sleep disruption, often accompanying it. For your hands, you explain, demonstrating application technique that maximizes absorption while minimizing waste of precious remedy, morning and night, with extra attention to these joints. You indicate specific areas showing most pronounced inflammation. And this tea before sleep, it won't eliminate the stiffness entirely, but should reduce its duration and intensity. The carpenter accepts both with appropriate appreciation, understanding their value beyond monetary measurement, each representing hours of knowledge, application, careful preparation, specific adaptation to his particular condition, rather than generic treatment applicable to any similar presentation. This personalization, this recognition of uniqueness within patterns shared across multiple patients, characterizes village medicine at its best intimate enough to acknowledge individual variation, experienced enough to recognize similarities with previously observed cases, and something else. You continue, hesitating slightly before offering suggestion that addresses psychological dimension, as important as physical intervention. Consider teaching your grandson these skills now, rather than waiting for traditional age. His hands are ready even if convention suggests otherwise. This recommendation, this encouragement toward earlier transmission of knowledge than usual practice dictates, acknowledges unspoken fear without directly naming it. That progressive condition might limit future opportunities for sharing hard-earned expertise, that waiting for appropriate time might result in lost connection between generations of craftsmen within same family lineage. The carpenter remains silent, momentarily, gaze returning to partially completed cradle as he considers implications beyond simple medical advice. He's young, he finally responds, neither accepting nor rejecting suggestion, but engaging with its underlying premise. Just 9 last spring. Old enough to begin learning, you counter gently, not for difficult work, but foundation skills, understanding of wood's properties, proper tool respect, things that require time to integrate fully. Unspoken, between you, remains shared awareness that his father's hands surrendered their skill before adequate transmission occurred. That valuable knowledge narrowly avoided disappearance through single generation's physical limitation. That similar pattern might repeat without conscious intervention to modify traditional timeline for apprenticeship progression. He nods slowly, decision visibly forming as he considers rearrangement of expectations to accommodate changing physical reality. Perhaps some simple projects first, he suggests, already mentally designing appropriate introduction for young hands not yet ready for complex techniques, but perfectly capable of beginning journey toward eventual mastery. Small boxes, perhaps, or simple spoons. Excellent starting points. You affirm, recognizing significant threshold crossed through this acceptance, not just of physical limitations reality, but of adaptation that preserves essential continuity, despite necessary modification of traditional forms. This willingness to reimagine established patterns represents healing more profound than any herbal remedy might provide reconciliation with changing circumstances that maintains core purpose while releasing attachment to particular methods of achieving it. Your own back offers sympathetic twinge as you gather your bag, physical reminder, shared vulnerability that connects practitioner with patient despite different specific manifestations. The carpenter returns to his work as you prepare to leave, hands resuming their dance with familiar tools. Movement slightly stiffer than in previous years, but no less purposeful, no less invested with accumulated knowledge and persistent intention. Outside again, you pause to observe sunlight's continuing battle with stubborn cloud cover. Momentary brightness, followed by returning shadow and pattern that mirrors human experience with pain's temporary intensification and release. Your own discomfort has receded further toward background awareness, neither eliminated nor dominant, but integrated into overall experience that continues despite by its presence. Pain teaches when we allow its instruction about necessary modification without complete surrender, about attention's power to transform experience without changing physical reality, about continuity of purpose despite alteration of specific methods about humanity's fundamental vulnerability as connective tissue binding, practitioner and patient in shared recognition, rather than separating them into helper and helped. You adjust your bag against your hip, modifying its position slightly to accommodate persistent sensitivity in lower back muscles. The next patient awaits. Different needs, different manifestations, different specific interventions required. Yet, beneath these variations runs common current each body, navigating its particular limitations while seeking to maintain essential function, each person balancing acknowledgement of reality against necessary hope, each healing interaction offering opportunity for knowledge transmission that extends beyond specific remedy toward deeper understanding of life's fundamental patterns. The path continues. You follow where it leads. Evening arrives with renewed rainfall, gentle but persistent, creating rhythmic accompaniment to your final patient visits of the day. By the time you turn toward home, full darkness has claimed the village, transforming familiar paths into mysterious territories, navigable primarily through memory and occasional lantern light, visible through cottage windows. Your feet find their way with practiced confidence, despite limited visibility. Years of traversing these same routes, having created knowledge that transcends conscious calculation. The day's work has left its mark on both body and spirit. A particular exhaustion familiar to those whose occupation involves continuous attention to others' needs. Your back's earlier discomfort has evolved into general weariness that permeates muscles and thoughts equally, creating the specific variety of fatigue that paradoxically combines physical depletion with mental alertness reluctant to surrender its vigilance. Your cottage appears ahead, dark now, having stood empty since midday replenishment of supplies. No welcoming light awaits your return, no meal prepared by other hands, no voice to greet your arrival after long hours of service. This solitude, this absence of immediate human connection at day's end, represents both necessary boundary and occasional loneliness, both protective separation and periodic price paid for the particular path you've chosen. Inside darkness waits like patient companion, accustomed to your comings and goings. You move through familiar space with minimal illumination from single candle lit. Immediately upon entry, its flame creating small circle of visibility while leaving most of the cottage in comfortable shadow. This limited light suits your current state. Gentle transition between day's demands and night's necessary surrender. Visual quieting that encourages similar calming of thought and emotion after hours of focused attention on others' needs. You remove your damp cloak and hang it near the small stove, where residual warmth from morning's fire has long since dissipated. Tonight requires renewed heat, both for physical comfort and for preparation of evening meal, delayed by day's extended responsibilities. With practiced efficiency, you build small fire using precisely arranged kindling that maximizes flame while minimizing smoke conservation of limited winter fuel supply, habitual after years of self-sufficiency. As warmth gradually reclaims the space you attend to immediate physical needs, postponed during busy hours, removal of mask and outer garments still carrying dampness from rainfall, gentle stretching of tired muscles, particularly affected by days, demands preparation of simple tea, whose warmth will begin necessary internal restoration. These self-care rituals, these attentions directed toward your own body after day spent attending others, maintain capacity for continued service impossible without basic maintenance of the vessel through which your knowledge flows. The small copper kettle begins its quiet song as water approaches boiling. Outside, rain continues its gentle percussion against roof and windows, creating acoustic boundary that enhances sense of sanctuary within these simple walls. This contrast between external elements and internal shelter offers physical manifestation of the separation between professional identity and private self necessary for sustainable practice in healing arts. With tea prepared and small plate of bread and cheese arranged from simple provisions kept for late returns, you settle into your chair near the window, position offering simultaneous connection to outside world through sound of rainfall and sheltered retreat within personal space, carefully maintained against excessive demands. This balance, engagement without immersion, connection without consumption, requires continuous recalibration through changing seasons of both year and career. The day's experiences begin their gradual procession through consciousness now granted, space for reflection, impossible during active practice. The woodcutter's son, facing weeks of limitation after momentary miscalculation. The elderly woman, finding temporary relief from weather intensified arthritis through warmed salve and genuine attention. The carpenter, consciously adjusting expectations as physical capacity changes multiple smaller interactions, carrying their own particular weight when accumulated across hours of continuous service. These reflections arrive not as burdensome rumination, but as necessary processing, integration of experience into existing knowledge, recognition of patterns across seemingly separate situations, identification of approaches that proved effective, and those requiring refinement before future application. This contemplative review constitutes essential professional practice rather than mere personal indulgence, the internal work that transforms accumulated experience into deepened wisdom, available for tomorrow's inevitable challenges. Your gaze shifts toward small shelf where reference texts maintain silent presence. Books acquired through careful trade or occasional extravagant purchase. When traveling, merchants brought particularly valuable volumes from distant cities. These written resources represent important complement to knowledge gained through direct experience and oral transmission, offering perspectives beyond local tradition and access to observations recorded by practitioners facing similar challenges in different contexts. Tonight, however, reading holds less appeal than simple presence with your own thoughts, allowing them to emerge without directed focus to find their natural organization without imposed structure. This receptive attention, this listening to internal processes without demanding immediate practical application, provides necessary counterbalance to today's continuous output of diagnostic assessment and treatment recommendation. The rain's rhythm changes subtly, its intensity increasing momentarily, before settling into steadier pattern that suggests continuation through night hours. This natural variation, this unpredictable yet ultimately reliable oscillation between greater and lesser intensity, mirrors human experience with both physical symptoms and emotional states, rarely maintaining constant presentation, but rather shifting through periods of intensification and relative calm, while following overall trajectory either toward resolution or adaptation. Your tea cools gradually as you sip between moments of contemplation. The familiar flavor, mint gathered from your garden's protected corner, honey from village beekeepers, spring harvest touch of lavender for its subtle calming property, offers sensory anchor during mental wandering. This attentiveness to physical sensation, this deliberate presence with immediate experience, represents another practice that sustains capacity for healing work. The cultivation of awareness that begins with one's own embodied existence before extending toward others' reported symptoms. A sudden gust drives rain more forcefully against your window, momentarily increasing volume before returning to previous, gentler persistence. This brief intensification draws your attention outward, again reconnecting you to the village that continues its existence beyond your walls. Somewhere, a child might wake, frightened by the sound elsewhere. An elder might feel increased ache in long-healed bones that still carry memory of ancient injury. The awareness of others' experiences, even when not directly witnessed, remains part of your consciousness after years of intimate involvement with the community's collective and individual suffering. Your thoughts turn toward tomorrow's anticipated responsibilities, checking the woodcutter's son's splinted arm for proper healing progression, bringing additional pain remedy to the elderly woman if rain continues its assault on arthritic joints, perhaps visiting Margareta to review her notes on winter cough treatments before seasonal illnesses begin their inevitable appearance. These projections, these extensions of consciousness into future obligations, serve practical planning purpose, while simultaneously demonstrating how deeply professional identity has become interwoven with personal existence. The candle flickers, slightly in response to subtle draft, its flame bending momentarily before recovering upright position. This simple phenomenon, this demonstration of resilience within apparent fragility, offers visual metaphor for human capacity to encounter disruptive forces without surrendering essential nature. You've witnessed this quality countless times in patients facing circumstances that initially appeared overwhelming. The young mother continuing to nurture her children despite debilitating fever, the farmer adapting techniques to accommodate injury that might have ended his livelihood, the elder maintaining dignity despite increasing dependency as body gradually surrenders former capabilities. Your own tiredness has evolved during this quiet interval, shifting from initial physical heaviness toward more integrated acceptance of days' accumulated toll. This transformation, this alchemy of exhaustion into reflective awareness, represents another form of healing different from, but complementary to, remedies prepared with material substances. Some restoration occurs through tangible intervention, other renewal emerges through internal processes given appropriate space and attention for natural unfolding. Outside, the rain continues its gentle conversation with roof tiles and window, glass with garden soil and village paths, with tree leaves and collecting puddles. This persistence, this continuous presence without demand for response, creates particular quality of companionship, different from human interaction, yet similarly comforting in its consistent attention. There exists specific comfort in being witnessed without expectation, in having existence, acknowledged without requirement for reciprocal engagement. This receptive presence, this listening without immediate response, characterizes certain healing interactions as well, moments when patients require witness to their experience more than specific intervention, when attentive silence provides more appropriate medicine than active treatment, when simple acknowledgement of suffering carries more therapeutic value than premature attempt at resolution. Learning to recognize these occasions, to distinguish between situations requiring action and those inviting presence, represents skill developed through experience rather than formal instruction. Your gaze shifts toward work table, where tomorrow's preparations will begin early, herbs requiring sorting tinctures, needing decanting salves, awaiting proper containers for distribution. These practical tasks, these tangible manifestations of abstract knowledge, maintain essential connection between theoretical understanding and physical application. Village healing thrives in this intersection. Intellectual comprehension made relevant through material engagement, ancient wisdom verified through contemporary observation, individual insight strengthened through collective experience, accumulated across generations of practice. The candle has burned considerably lower, its diminishing height marking passage of evening hours more reliably than conscious awareness of time's progression. This visual reminder, this tangible evidence of duration otherwise experienced subjectively, suggests appropriate transition toward sleep necessary for tomorrow's effectiveness. You've learned through experience that healing capacity depends on practitioners' well-being, as surely as garden yield depends on soil quality. Self-care represents professional responsibility rather than personal indulgence. Rising from your chair requires momentary negotiation with tired muscles and stiffened joints, body expressing accumulated impact of day's activities through physical sensation that neither defines nor diminishes overall experience. This dialogue with physical limitation, this ongoing conversation with embodied existence, provides continuous education in the very processes you address in others: adaptation to changing capacity, acknowledgement of temporary discomfort, appropriate response that neither ignores genuine need nor magnifies it beyond actual significance. Preparing for sleep involves minimal ritual banking, fire for morning's rekindling, extinguishing candle, with careful breath that prevents wayward sparks, final check of door's security against night visitors, whether human or animal. These actions, performed with such regularity, they require minimal conscious direction, create transitional boundary between active engagement and necessary surrender to restoration. Only unconsciousness can provide. In darkness, now complete, except for faint glow of banked coals, you settle beneath blankets woven by village hands, from wool shorn from local flocks, tangible reminder of interconnection that sustains individual existence Within community context, the rain continues its gentle percussion. Overhead, its rhythm now transformed from a background accompaniment to foregrounded lullaby, inviting deeper release of conscious control maintained throughout demanding day. Sleep approaches not as absence, but as different quality of presence, consciousness shifting focus rather than disappearing entirely. In this liminal territory between waking and dreaming, certain insights often emerge with particular clarity connections between seemingly unrelated symptoms observed in different patients, potential applications for recently acquired herbs not yet incorporated into regular practice, subtle patterns of seasonal illness, suggesting preventive measures worth implementing before acute need arises. These twilight revelations, these understandings that arrive when intellectual effort relaxes its determined grip, represent another form of knowledge acquisition, different from but complementary to deliberate study. Some wisdom enters through front door of conscious investigation, other understanding slips quietly through side entrance of receptive awareness, neither fully awake nor completely surrendered to unconsciousness. The rain listens, the night holds, sleep finally claims its temporary dominion over a mind and body that have served others throughout daylight hours and now require their own season of restoration. Tomorrow will bring new challenges, different needs, fresh opportunities for both success and failure in the ongoing endeavor to ease suffering within limited sphere of influence. But for now, in darkness, accompanied by gentle rainfall, healing hands rest, while healing and knowledge integrates through processes that continue without conscious direction. This too represents wisdom learned through practice, that certain essential developments occur not through deliberate effort, but through appropriate surrender to natural processes that continue their work when willful attention steps aside. The healer sleeps, the village dreams. The rain maintains its gentle vigil throughout the darkness that listens without judgment to all it contains. First light arrives as gentle suggestion rather than definitive statement. Gray illumination, gradually distinguishing wall from window table, from chair familiar objects emerging from night's formless shadow. You wake naturally, body having completed necessary restoration during hours of deep sleep, uninterrupted by either external disturbance or internal disquiet. This complete surrender, this temporary release of conscious vigilance, provides essential counterbalance to day's continuous attention allowing renewal, impossible through partial rest alone. Your first awareness registers the silence, rainfall having ceased sometime during night hours, leaving behind quietude punctuated only by occasional water droplet falling from eaves to ground below. This absence, this negative space where persistent sound previously existed, creates its own presence, inviting different quality of attention than yesterday's rhythmic accompaniment demanded. Weather's shifting patterns mirror healing processes, sometimes dramatic in their presentation, other times marked primarily by gradual cessation of symptoms previously considered normal. Through their persistent familiarity, you rise with deliberate movements, body communicating through initial stiffness that yesterday's exertions left their temporary signature on muscles and joints. This morning, discomfort, this physical reminder of service rendered, neither surprises nor discourages after years of similar experiences. Brief stretching routine, evolved through practical necessity, addresses most persistent areas. Lower back that protests after hours, bent examining patients, shoulders that tighten from carrying leather bag throughout village rounds, neck that stiffens from maintained focus on detailed work, preparing remedies. The cottage air holds morning chill, common to early autumn, not winter's biting cold, but definite absence of summer's lingering warmth. This seasonal transition, this gradual shift toward dormant period, influences both physical symptoms patients present and remedies available for treatment. Respiratory complaints increase as bodies adapt to temperature fluctuations. Immune systems require additional support during adaptation to changing conditions. Certain medicinal plants reach peak potency while others begin their retreat into roots until spring's return. You rebuild fire with practiced efficiency, coaxing banked coals from beneath protective layer of ash, adding smallest kindling first before gradually introducing larger pieces. This process, this attentive encouragement of potential energy into active expression, represents another healing metaphor. How careful attention to appropriate sequence transforms dormant possibility into effective function. Skilled intervention respects natural processes while creating conditions that support their optimal manifestation, rather than attempting to replace or override inherent patterns with external force. While morning tea steeps, different blend from evening's calming mixture, now incorporating energizing herbs appropriate for day's beginning. You open small window despite lingering chill. Fresh air enters immediately, carrying complex aromatic signature of recent rainfall earthiness, where soil releases minerals previously bound in drier conditions, sweetness from fallen leaves, beginning their transformation toward humus, subtle hints of wood smoke from chimneys already active throughout the village. These scents, these invisible messengers from surrounding environment, provide information as valuable as visual observation, confirmation that natural cycles continue their progression regardless of human circumstance or concern. Your morning meal remains simple by choice rather than necessity. Bread baked by village baker cheese from local goats tended by family maintaining this specific craft. Through generations, apple from tree behind cottage that produces fruit remarkable more for proximity than exceptional flavor. This simplicity, this deliberate limitation of options, preserves energy for decisions that matter more significantly, which patients require immediate attention, versus those who might safely wait, which symptoms indicate serious development, versus temporary discomfort, which treatments offer meaningful intervention, versus those merely masking underlying issues requiring different approach. As you eat, mental inventory begins assembling itself without conscious effort, supplies requiring replenishment before winter limits, gathering opportunities, remedies needing preparation, while certain plants remain available, preventive measures worth implementing before seasonal illnesses begin their predictable appearance. This planning, this extension of awareness beyond immediate demands toward anticipated future needs, represents essential aspect of effective practice, prevention receiving, equal attention alongside treatment, preparation, maintaining equal importance with application. Outside your window village, life resumes its visible activity. Smoke rising from morning fires, shutters opening to admit daylight into homes kept closed against night chill, occasional figure moving purposefully between buildings as daily responsibilities begin their familiar progression. This collective awakening, this community-wide transition from private restoration toward public engagement creates context within which your individual practice exists, not separate from, but integrally connected to larger social organism that both generates need for your services and provides foundation, making them possible. You dress with appropriate attention today's anticipated demands, layers allowing adjustment to changing temperatures when moving between heated interiors and cool autumn air, sturdy boots prepared for muddy paths remaining from yesterday's rainfall, clothing practical for activities ranging from garden work, harvesting final herbs, to patient visitations requiring professional presentation. This preparation, this practical anticipation of varied requirements reflects broader approach to healing work, flexibility maintained within underlying structure, adaptation occurring within framework of established principles. Before leaving, cottage brief visit to garden behind small dwelling provides both physical transition between private and public spaces and a practical assessment of available resources. Many plants show evidence of recent rainfall, leaves weighted with moisture, soil darkened by absorption, certain stems bent under temporary burden, soon to be transformed into renewed vigor. Others demonstrate seasonal progression toward dormancy, flowers faded and forming seed heads leaves, beginning color change, signaling chlorophyll's retreat. Overall, vitality shifting from visible growth toward internal consolidation necessary for winter survival. You harvest with selective attention calendula flowers still vibrant enough for drying final sage leaves before frost diminishes their essential oil content. Rose hips reaching optimal ripeness for vitamin-rich preparations valuable during winter months when fresh fruits become scarce. Each plant receives appropriate acknowledgement, not merely through practical harvesting technique, but through recognition of its particular contribution to healing work that depends on relationship rather than mere extraction. This garden, this cultivated space, representing partnership between human intention and natural processes, manifests another fundamental principle underlying your practice, that healing emerges through cooperation with existing patterns rather than imposition of external will, through enhancement of natural tendencies rather than replacement with artificial interventions. The most effective treatments often involve minimal interference with maximum attention, creating conditions supporting body's inherent movement toward balance rather than forcing specific outcomes through increasingly powerful interventions. Basket, containing morning's harvest, balanced against hip, you survey village, visible from garden's slight elevation. Smoke rises from numerous chimneys in the vertical columns, indicating air's stillness after yesterday's disturbance. Occasional voices carry clearly through morning quiet. Child's laughter, two women's conversation near community well, blacksmith's hammer already creating rhythmic percussion accompanying days beginning. These sounds, these audible manifestations of community continuing its existence, provide context for individual healing work that addresses particular suffering while remaining conscious of collective experience within which personal pain occurs. Your day's first destination appears in mental planning, the woodcutter's cottage, where young boy with recently set fracture requires assessment to ensure proper healing progression. This priority, checking recent acute intervention before addressing chronic conditions, reflects practical triage constantly performed in village practice without formal emergency protocols governing decision-making. Experience has taught appropriate sequencing, which conditions demand immediate attention versus those benefiting from patient waiting, which interventions require prompt follow-up versus those better evaluated after longer duration. You gather necessary supplies into familiar leather bag, fresh bandaging material for possible splint adjustment, additional pain-relieving herbs likely needed as initial stronger dose, diminishes small carved toy created during evening hours, practical tool disguised as simple gift that will encourage appropriate movement of fingers extending beyond splint's necessary restriction. These provisions, combination of medical necessity and psychological support, reflect integrated understanding of healing that addresses physical condition within context of whole person experiencing temporary limitation. The morning air feels surprisingly mild as you step onto village path, sunlight having gained sufficient strength to dispel lingering chill, despite abundant moisture remaining from yesterday's persistent rainfall. Puddles, reflecting blue sky and scattered clouds, create temporary mirrors, disrupting familiar landscape with duplicated fragments of overhead scenery. This transformation, this alteration of ordinary perception through natural phenomenon, offers momentary reminder that reality contains multiple perspectives simultaneously, that familiar scenes reveal different aspects when viewed through altered conditions. Village activity increases noticeably during brief journey toward day's first appointment. Children running toward schoolhouse, where education continues, regardless of weather conditions. Adults engaged in various occupations adapted to recent rainfall, gutters being cleared of debris, carried down from rooftops, firewood moved from exposed stacks to covered storage, anticipating winter's approach, gardens assessed for storm damage, requiring immediate attention. This collective industry, this community-wide engagement with practical necessity, demonstrates resilience that extends beyond individual experience into shared cultural values, maintaining functionality despite external challenges. You exchange brief greetings with those you pass, acknowledgments sufficient to maintain social connection without delaying purposeful movement towards specific responsibility. These minimal interactions, contextualizing your specialized role within broader community fabric, maintain balanced relationship between professional identity and neighborly participation. You remain simultaneously healer with particular obligations and village member with shared investment in collective well-being. Distinct roles requiring different expressions, yet ultimately serving integrated purpose. The woodcutter's cottage appears ahead, smoke rising steadily from chimney indicating family's morning activities progressing normally despite yesterday's disruption. This visual evidence, this simple sign of continued functioning, provides initial positive indication before more detailed medical assessment occurs. Often, most meaningful healing involves supporting normal life continuation around temporary limitation rather than creating specialized circumstances highlighting difference between injured and healthy states. You approach the door with confidence, tempered by appropriate humility, carrying knowledge that might ease suffering while recognizing inherent uncertainty, accompanying all biological processes including healing. Each morning offers this renewal opportunity to apply accumulated wisdom to fresh challenges, to transform yesterday's reflection into today's improved practice, to approach familiar conditions with deepened understanding while remaining open to unexpected developments that inevitably arise despite most careful anticipation. Morning light strengthens around you as you knock gently on wooden door. Within voices respond to your arrival, life continuing its progression despite temporary interruption, adaptation already occurring around limitation that yesterday appeared overwhelming. This resilience, this capacity for adjustment within adversity, represents the most profound medicine of all. Not elimination of all difficulty, but integration of challenge into continuing narrative that acknowledges pain without becoming defined exclusively by its presence. The door opens. A new day of healing begins. Evening returns you to your cottage after day filled with expected responsibilities and inevitable surprises that characterize healing practice, regardless of careful planning. The woodcutter's son showed encouraging signs of proper bone healing beneath splint, maintained with appropriate vigilance by concerned family. The elderly woman required additional pain remedy for persistent arthritic discomfort, exacerbated by lingering dampness despite sunshine's surface drying. Several unplanned encounters occurred between scheduled visits. Mother seeking advice for child's emerging rash farmer, requesting treatment for deep splinter, embedded while repairing storm-damaged fence, midwife consulting about pregnant woman's concerning symptoms, requiring collaborative assessment. Now, with daylight surrendering to dusk's gradual dominion, you stand momentarily in your garden, transitional space between public responsibility and private restoration. The day's final light transforms ordinary plants into extraordinary presences, sage leaves appearing silvery rather than green, lavender stalks creating purple-gray brush strokes against darker soil, rosemary's needled texture, catching light along edges while interiors recede into deepening shadow. This transformation, this brief revelatory illumination, before darkness claims detailed observation, offers visual reminder of how perspective alters perception, how shifting conditions reveal different aspects of unchanging reality. Your body carries accumulated evidence of days' service shoulders slightly lowered from hours supporting leather bags' weight, feet registering each cobblestone, encountered during village rounds, hands bearing subtle traces of remedies prepared and applied throughout varying encounters. This physical testimony, this embodied record of care extended, represents tangible counterpart to less visible dimensions of healing work attention maintained across diverse needs, knowledge applied to unique situations, presence offered during moments of vulnerability and uncertainty. Inside your cottage, familiar tasks create evening ritual that both concludes day's activities and prepares for tomorrow's continuation fire, rekindled against night's approaching chill. Simple meal assembled from available provisions, workbench organized for morning's fresh preparations. These actions, performed with such regularity, they require minimal, conscious direction, provide necessary structure, supporting freedom within other aspects of practice that demand continuous adaptation to unpredictable circumstances. As you settle into chair beside window offering final glimpse of daylight's retreat, reflection emerges not as deliberate practice, but as natural response to completed cycle of service. What remains after day's specific interventions? The splint applied, the pain temporarily eased, the wound carefully cleaned, the concern thoughtfully addressed. What endures beyond immediate effectiveness of particular remedies or technical procedures performed with accumulated skill? Certain answers appear immediately, knowledge transmitted through demonstration and explanation that will inform recipients' future responses to similar situations, confidence instilled through witnessing recovery that strengthens belief in body's inherent healing capacity, trust deepened through reliable presence during vulnerability that encourages appropriate help seeking when future need arises. These outcomes, less measurable than physical symptom reduction, yet equally significant for sustained well-being, represent essential aspects of healing practice, extending beyond immediate intervention toward long-term relationship with health and illness. Other considerations emerge more gradually. How patterns observed across multiple patients might inform preventive approaches before winter illness season fully manifests. Which remedies require preparation while certain plants remain available? What subtle shifts in community dynamics might indicate emerging needs before they develop into acute crises? This broader awareness, this attention to interconnected patterns beyond individual cases, distinguishes mature practitioner from technical expert merely applying specialized knowledge to isolated problems. Outside, darkness has completed its gradual claim over visible landscape, transforming window from portal offering external view into mirror reflecting interior space. This transition, this shift from outward observation to inward reflection parallels movement occurring within your own awareness as day's external activities yield to evening's internal processing. Both transitions serve essential functions within natural rhythms governing human experience, regardless of specific occupation or circumstance. The question returns with quiet persistence: what remains beyond specific treatments administered, beyond temporary relief provided, beyond technical procedures performed with practiced skill? What endures after individual encounters conclude and collective practice continues its generational unfolding? What truly constitutes healing beyond measurable symptom reduction or functional restoration? Perhaps what remains most fundamentally is presence itself, the willingness to encounter suffering without flinching away, the capacity to witness pain without immediately attempting its elimination, the courage to acknowledge limitation without surrendering to despair, the humility to recognize mystery without abandoning continued effort toward understanding. This quality, this particular form of attentive accompaniment during difficult passages, may constitute medicine more profound than any remedy contained in leather bag or recorded in carefully maintained journals. You've observed this principle repeatedly throughout years of practice, how patients sometimes improve despite rather than because of specific interventions, how similar treatments produce dramatically different outcomes in seemingly comparable conditions, how presence itself often provides relief. No physical remedy could achieve how attention offered without judgment sometimes catalyzes healing processes resistant to more direct approaches. These observations suggest something beyond technical skill or specialized knowledge, operating within effective healing relationships, something closer to fundamental human connection, transcending particular methodologies or theoretical frameworks. The fire shifts in small hearth, momentarily increasing illumination as hidden pocket of resin ignites within seemingly ordinary log. This unexpected brightening, this surge of light emerging from unremarkable source, offers visual metaphor for healing moments that arrive unpredictably within ordinary interactions, sudden insights revealed during routine consultation, unexpected connections formed through seemingly casual conversation, profound relief emerging through simple acknowledgement of previously unrecognized suffering. What remains is relationship, not merely between individual healer and specific patient, but between community members, sustaining each other through inevitable vulnerabilities, accompanying human existence. The baker who modifies bread for elderly residents with difficult digestion, the carpenter who crafts special chair supporting neighbors' injured back, the farmer who ensures fresh vegetables reach homebound villagers during illness or recovery. All participate in healing network extending beyond formal medical practice into fundamental social fabric, maintaining collective well-being. What remains is knowledge transmitted, not only through explicit instruction or written documentation, but through embodied demonstration, through stories conveying experiential wisdom, through mentorship, allowing direct observation of skilled practice. Your own understanding developed through similar pathways, formal apprenticeship, with Margareta providing theoretical foundation, while daily practice gradually constructed practical wisdom, impossible to fully articulate yet essential for effective application. This transmission continues as you demonstrate proper splint application while explaining rationale to woodcutter's curious daughter, as you identify medicinal plants during village walks, with children showing particular interest, as you share appropriate portions of your understanding with patients seeking greater participation in their own healing processes. What remains is integration of apparent opposites necessary for sustainable practice, confidence balanced with humility knowledge, tempered by recognition of inherent uncertainty, authority grounded in service rather than domination, boundaries maintained without creating unnecessary separation. This balance, this continuous recalibration between complementary qualities, allows healing work to avoid extremes equally problematic in their manifestation, arrogant certainty that dismisses legitimate questions or paralyzing doubt that prevents necessary action when suffering requires response, despite incomplete understanding. The candle beside you burns steadily, flame maintaining consistent height, while gradually transforming solid wax into light and warmth through invisible chemical processes. This transformation, this conversion of one form into another through application of appropriate catalyst, mirrors healing processes that remain partially mysterious, despite centuries of careful observation and documented experience. Some changes occur visibly, others happen beyond perceptual threshold, yet produce undeniable effects witnessed in eventual outcomes rather than immediate mechanisms. What remains ultimately transcends individual practitioner or specific methodology, continuing beyond particular lifetimes through knowledge preserved and transmitted through values maintained across generations, through understanding gradually deepened through collective experience. Your practice represents single thread within tapestry extending backward through teachers who prepared you for this work and forward through those who will continue after your individual contribution concludes. This continuity, this participation in enduring tradition, provides context, transforming daily challenges from isolated struggles into meaningful participation in essential human endeavor maintained through centuries of dedicated attention. Outside night has fully claimed its temporary dominion, stars gradually emerging as eyes adjust to deepened darkness. Their presence, distant yet reliable, unchanged through human generations, yet appearing slightly different through each observer's unique perspective, offers final metaphor for what remains after day's work reaches completion, something enduring beyond individual intervention, something simultaneously universal and intimately personal, something existing independently, yet revealed through relationship and attention. You rise from chair body, momentarily protesting transition from extended rest to renewed movement. Tomorrow will bring its own demands, its own opportunities for both effectiveness and limitation, its own invitation to continue practice that never reaches perfection, yet always offers possibility for deeper understanding through committed presence. The specific remedies will change with seasons and circumstances. The particular patients will present varying needs, requiring different responses. The individual practitioner will continue developing through experience and reflection. Yet beneath these variables runs constant current, the fundamental human connection that transforms technical intervention into genuine healing, that converts knowledge into wisdom through application within relationship that sustains both provider and recipient through mutual recognition of shared vulnerability and resilience. What remains is this: the quiet certainty that suffering, while inevitable within human experience, need not be faced in isolation. The practical demonstration that attention itself constitutes powerful medicine when offered with skill and genuine presence. The lived understanding that healing happens not through elimination of all difficulty, but through integration of challenge into continuing narrative that acknowledges pain without becoming defined exclusively by its presence. You bank the fire for morning's rekindling extinguish, candle with careful breath, and prepare for sleep that will restore capacity for tomorrow's service. Outside, the village settles into night's embrace, individual lights gradually diminishing as shared darkness connects separate dwellings into single community, temporarily surrendered to restoration necessary for continued functioning. Within this quiet darkness, healing continues through processes requiring no conscious direction. Bones knitting beneath carefully maintained splints, herbs gradually releasing medicinal properties into preparations set aside for morning distribution, bodies repairing daily damage through mechanisms evolved over countless generations. What remains is commitment to presence, tomorrow and the day following, and all days granted for continuation of practice that never reaches completion, yet always offers opportunity for meaningful service within inevitable limitation. This commitment, this daily renewal of intention, despite full awareness of both effectiveness and failure, perhaps constitutes the most profound medicine of all the demonstration that purpose continues despite difficulty, that meaning emerges through dedication to values, transcending immediate outcome, that healing in its fullest sense involves not perfection, but wholehearted participation in ongoing human endeavor to ease suffering through attentive care. Night deepens around the village. Stars maintain their distant vigilance. The healer sleeps, while healing continues through processes visible and invisible, known and mysterious, individual and collective. What remains endures through darkness toward morning's inevitable return.